City Hall, can you hear me okay? Great. Sorry, my connection was a little bit slow, so thank you everybody for your patience. We'll call this evening's April 6th meeting of the Wabasha City Council to order, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jess or Tyler or Wendy, would you just say something so I can make sure my audio is working?
Testing.
Great, thanks. It's just a little weird when I got started. Wonderful. I don't believe we have any guest speakers joining us this evening. Okay. But we would certainly enjoy public comment if there is any. This is the time in the agenda where we can hear from members of the public. If you'd like to share something with council, we don't necessarily respond in this time frame, but share your concern or comment. Just introduce yourself with your name and your residence for the record, and please feel free to share with us.
My name is Sharon Burke, and I would like to make a couple of remarks.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi. So I'm Sharon Burke. I live on Milligan Avenue. However, I'm temporarily housed at 605 Main Street, which is across from Slippery's and right next to the bicycle path. Before living in this particular part of town, I was unaware of how huge the issue is of owners not picking up after their dogs. Signs of this are all over Beach Park, all along the bike path, down alleyways, in the campgrounds, and all over the property where I'm staying, which is a rental. It's in the front, along the side yard, right up to the house, and all over the backyard. I see many passersby walking their dogs 2 or 3 times a day with that, and who do not clean up after their dogs. Here's some stats. At 2 daily deposits per dog, that's 60 piles per month, or 720 piles per year. At 3 a day, as is the case with my German Shepherd, that's over 1,000 deposits per year. Per the city website, any person violating section 90.06 of the city ordinance shall be punishable by a fine of $10 or 5 hours of public lands fecal cleanup. Any person who is found guilty of subsequent violations shall be punished by a fine of at least $25, but not more than $50. I would encourage the council to consider the following. Require all offenders to perform 5 hours of public lands fecal cleanup. This penalty would be equally unpleasant for all, regardless of socioeconomic status. Raise the fine to $100 per incident with the option of additional cleanup time for anyone for whom the fine would be a financial hardship. Ensure the dog bag stations are stocked regularly year-round, and have police officers, while on patrol, hand a disposal bag to passing dog walkers. Those who don't pick up after their dogs will get the hint, and those who do may appreciate the city's concerns. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sharon. I appreciate it.
I have one other remark regarding the Perry's request for construction variance. Will there be an opportunity to do so later, or is this the time to do it?
Now's the time, please.
Okay, I would just like to say that speaking as a private citizen, I'd like to express my support for their variance request for construction of their garage at their home on Coffee Mill Drive. I see this as a reasonable and minor request, and it has no negative impact on neighboring properties, and there is no record of objections from neighbors. I think there are times not to get hung up on technicalities and just use common sense. They're talking about 5 feet, and I just want to support them. Their home isn't in a neighborhood like if they were down in the center of town where there could be compatibility issues. They are on a piece of property that's quite a distance from other property. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Sharon. It sounded like you had your remarks written down. Would you send them to the city, your comments related to the dog waste?
I'd be happy
Okay,
to.
that would be great. Thank you. I jotted them down, but then we'll have them from you. Thank you. Any other public comment? See, there are some unfamiliar names. So I just want to make sure I'm giving people time. If you're not accustomed to Zoom and you're trying to speak, you might be on mute. If you look down at the bottom of your own name or photograph, there will be a little red microphone that you'll have to click to unmute yourself. Okay, hearing nothing further, we'll move on, excuse me, to changes or additions to the agenda. Any from staff?
We did add one item earlier this afternoon. It's 10.8. It's the jetter back truck resolution.
Great, so that's stated.
Yes.
Anything from council? All right, well, we have a large agenda, so maybe that's a good thing that we don't have any additions. From my mayor's message, I always want to keep things brief, but especially when we have a long agenda. But I have the great pleasure of introducing our new city administrator, Caroline Gregerson. Caroline will wave here, and then we'll give her a chance to say hello herself. Caroline's first day was Monday. She's becoming acquainted with all the city staff, of course, but also organizations and individuals that make the community run. Caroline's originally from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, so I teased with Tyler that the Wisconsin-Minnesota balance is getting a little tense maybe at City Hall. We have to see if there's a rivalry, but she also has a Minnesota background. Caroline went to the College of St. Benedict for her undergraduate work and then pursued a master's degree in public administration at Syracuse University. And professionally, she's most recently served in a leadership role for the city of La Crosse. She was working for 7 years as the community development administrator, where she managed federal community development block grant funding, TIF, city funding, contract management, multi-year community planning efforts, and a lot of engaging of citizens and other stakeholders, especially on housing and economic development. Caroline and her family are trying to relocate to Wabasha. If you haven't gotten this news flash, it's really hard to find housing and probably harder than that to find childcare. And so she has to get those essentials secured before she can really relocate her family. So right now she's got 2 days of meetings or City Hall in-person time, and she's going to be telecommuting the remainder of the time. She's got a city cell phone that you can reach her at easily. And of course, she's going to be available through email. She's going to be a tremendous asset to the city. We've already had a lot of good conversation. I know she had a long meeting already with our city engineer, Brian Malm. So we're really excited to have her on board. And the department heads and city staff are invited to have a meet and greet tomorrow. So I really appreciate City Hall for organizing that. That'll be great for everyone involved. Caroline, do you want to say hello quick or anything about yourself that you want us to know?
Thank you. And I'm having some connection issues. So everyone's frozen right now. Let me just go to a different part of my house here.
And if we lose you on video, we'll understand if you disconnect from video that you're not
okay.
multitasking.
But basically, I've been just really felt welcome by the staff and very impressed with the staff here in the city of Wabasha. And my priorities right now are just meeting and talking with people and understanding their priorities. And so I do hope to reach out to each one of the council members for a one-on-one meeting, and as well as get ideas from you all about who I should be meeting with. So I'm just learning as much as I can right now. And just like I said, just feel very welcome. So thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. One of the things that I touched base with Caroline about right away today is that the city will be receiving local fiscal recovery funds. So this is the new bill signed into law here at the beginning of 2021. A lot of this is going to bear on forthcoming guidance from the Treasury. However, the League of Minnesota Cities conducted a very very informative webinar. I know Tyler watched it, and I think Jeff watched it live, and I just watched it as in a recording, forwarded it to Caroline, and I would encourage other members of council to take a look at that. If you just Google LMC recovery fund, it'll come right up. It's going to be interesting. I think we're going to have to be strategic about how we plan for that money to come our way. High level, $350 billion is going to states and units of local government, and that's a really substantial increase over what was allocated last year. The funding period is, I believe, March 3rd of 2021, all the way through December 1st of 2024. Most of the costs that are eligible are related to response to the COVID-19 emergency. However, there are a few exceptions. Wastewater infrastructure and broadband, those kinds of projects do not need to be responsive to the COVID-19 emergency. Essentially, in Minnesota, what it has boiled down to is about $4.7 billion in federal aid, $2 billion of that going to cities, townships, counties, and other units of local government. So all of the local municipalities, including townships, will receive money. Our county will receive money. And so we will have to plan for that. It's going to be, it sounds like it's about $280,000 for the city of Wabasha. It's a formula based on population. And Tyler's been on top of it already, kind of looking at operations at the city level and what we might need to be thinking about to eligibly expend those funds. That is going to be some require quite a bit of effort on staff's part. I think Caroline's already thinking about stakeholders that she might be able to reach out to think about where some hidden need might be. Infrastructure, especially wastewater, is really an obvious one. Pat was able to tee up plenty of costs already that would probably be eligible, but we need to be considerate of where we might not know the need is. And so she and I will talk a little bit more about how to do that. One thing we could do is do that casually. Certainly members of council can reach out to your constituents and share what you learn. I was a part of a visit with Congresswoman Angie Craig today. She was at the chamber office. She specifically wanted to hear from businesses, especially those that were hit hard, retail and food service. She'd also been to the school. And the array of stories, is interesting. It certainly hasn't been equitable. Some businesses have thrived, some businesses have regrouped and weathered through, and some businesses are still in trouble, and there's going to be a shadow of an economic problem for them here well beyond probably 2021. And so I think that at the business sector level, there's probably a lot we could learn if we started asking. That is all I think related to COVID. Please stay tuned to our local health sector and of course our county public health with regards to vaccine. There's great news on that front. I don't want to speak for those entities because the details emerge all the time, but if you aren't following them on social media or looking at their websites, do that. It's good news. We're getting to the point where Minnesotans that are 16 and over are eligible, dependent upon vaccine availability. And it's very nice to see our local library celebrated on the front page of our local paper. There's lots of programming restarting in our libraries, which is a wonderful feeling. And I'm very eager to get back to some of those normal activities of life. And the library website is just full of activities coming up in 2021. I think that's all from me. Any
Did you
other?
say there's a meet and greet tomorrow for Caroline?
There is. Who wants to speak to that? Is it 11 o'clock? City Hall, folks? It's going to do it after your department meeting.
Let me double check. It's either 11:30 or noon.
Okay.
I can say it's 11:30.
Great. Thanks, Ed.
Okay.
At City Hall.
Okay.
Super. Any other committee reports or Wabasha good news or information from members of council? Okay, hearing none. We can take an administrator's report. I don't know if Caroline has much to say after 2 days on the job. I wasn't in town for her first day, but she's got 2 days in. Erin, anything you want to share with us or otherwise anything from city staff?
I don't have anything further.
Except what I call the new job headache. I always get even if it's been a great week, when you have a new job, I think it creates a headache for at least the first 5 days. So that's understandable. Anything from City Hall, Tyler or Jess, anything you were hoping to share? Okay. All right. So we have a consent agenda, which is includes our approval of March 2nd, 2021 regular council minutes. We have a DOT wage adjustment, a step increase for Austin Little. Purchase of certified wood chips for the parks, which was authorized by the park board. April warrants, and you probably saw Jess sent out some additional warrants for April. the ambulance policy and procedures and their exposure plan, compliant with OSHA, gambling license and temporary one-day liquor license for St. Felix for their golf outing, a transient merchant permit for pre-gamers charcoal barbecue, and a transient merchant permit for Dancing River Blooms. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move.
By Moyer.
Second by Tim.
Okay, great. I heard Dean for the first a motion and Tim for a second. Any further discussion? All right. Hearing none, we'll call for a roll vote.
Welcome. Welcome. Come back to Friedmeier,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Walrick,
Yes.
Woodley,
Yes.
Sella,
Yes.
Welcome,
Yes.
Durand.
Yes. Thank you. We do not have a public hearing tonight. On general business, we have our annual audit presentation. We have Andy Berg here from Abdo Eichen Meyer. Thanks for being with us, Andy.
Good evening.
I'm guessing you want to share your screen with us.
I will do that. I'll need the host to give me access before I can share the screen too. So it still looks disabled.
Let's see. Second here. I'll be out to get the no. Yeah, I've got share screen, but I can't. It's only my screen.
Can be pokey.
All right, there looks like it's gonna work now.
Okay.
So I assume everyone can see my screen now?
Looks great. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm Andy Berg with Abdo Eichen Myers, here to do a presentation on the results of the 2020 audit. So what I'll cover today is our audit opinion and result. We'll look at the general fund activities. We'll look at the fund balance. We'll look at the budget to actual and then some revenue and expenditure trends. We'll look at the other governmental funds, your special revenue, capital project, and debt service. And then we'll look at your enterprise funds, some cash balance and cash flow data, and then some key performance indicators, looking at comparison to other cities of similar size and also within your county.
I'll pause you for just a second, Andy. We might be getting a little background noise, if any, from someone's microphone or someone's speakers. If anybody is not muted, please mute yourself until you have a comment. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So the end result of our audit is to issue an opinion on your financial statements. So we issued an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion, the best opinion you can get. So that is good news. As part of the audit, we also test for a number of different areas in the Minnesota legal compliance that the state auditor puts out for us, such as claims and disbursement, debt, contract and bidding. Also a clean report there. As part of the audit, we do gain an understanding of the city's internal controls. We're not issuing an opinion on the effectiveness of the controls. For this year's audit, we do have two findings. The top one, the preparation of financial statements, very similar to previous years, also very common with small to medium-sized organizations. So we're in doing the financial statement audit, and we're also preparing the financial statements. So that's listed as an internal control finding. The city does have compensating controls where Tyler reviewed the draft audit before it was finalized, and we went over any of his questions with him. We also have a finding for audit adjustments. So we came in and the cash and investments weren't fully reconciled, so we had to make some entries to get that corrected. So we're in the process of working with Tyler to help him understand that better. We walked through that with him, and I don't foresee that being an issue going forward after this audit. So now jumping into the numbers, starting with the general fund, here's a 5-year history of your ending fund balance, which is indicated by that blue line. We compare that to your fund balance policy, the gray line, and then also the next year's budget. So you do have a policy where you want to maintain that at least at 60% of your next year's budget. You'll see back in 2019, you did make a transfer out into your capital fund to get that down to 60%. Basically maintain that at right around that 60%, 59.5 at the end of 2020. So looking at the ending fund balance at the end of 2020 compared to your 2021 budget of about $3 million. So right in line with your fund balance policy. Now, if we look at how that fund balance changed during the year, here's your budget to actual results in the general fund. Both revenue and expenditures, the first two lines, relatively close to budget. So revenue just under 2.9 million, 51,000 higher than budget. The biggest variance there is the CARES funding that you received. You received about 125,000 of CARES funding recognized in the general fund. Expenditures, real close to budget, just over 2.9 million, $25,000 variance. So revenues, under expenditures about 39,000. You transfer in about 55,000. So total fund balance increase about 15,000, ending at 1.82 million. So that's the number we're looking at on the first slide. It's important to maintain that 60% to meet your cash flow needs with your state aids and property taxes, not coming in until halfway through the year where your expenditures are incurred more evenly. So we look at a 3-year history of your revenue sources. As you know, the majority of your revenue is coming from property taxes. You can see back in 2018, the blue bar compared to 2020, the green bar. Property taxes have increased consistent with the increase in your budget we looked at the fund balance graph. The intergovernmental revenue, so the bulk of that's your local government aid. You do see a jump in 2020, mainly related to the CARES funding that you received. Charges for service are relatively consistent over the 3-year period. And then that other category, that does include the transfers out. So you'll see in 2019, a jump there mainly due to the transfer out to get that general fund balance at 60%. Similar graph with expenditures. Here again, a 3-year history with most of the expenditures by type increasing, which is consistent with that increase in budget. Your highest area of spending is public safety, so your fire, police, ambulance, followed by public works. Now moving on to your other governmental funds, starting with your special revenue funds. So you do have 3 special revenue funds. We gave you a comparison of your ending fund balance at the end of 2020 compared to 2019. Total fund balance at 695,000. Increase about 66,000 from 2019, with the bulk of that being in your Port Authority, about 503,000. I think the important piece in this graph is to note that these are special revenue funds and are restricted for specific purposes. That graph below indicates that. It also shows that over a 3-year period, the total fund balance has increased there too. The library fund ended at about 183,000, which was an increase of about 42,000. Moving on to your capital project funds. You do have 3 funds remaining here at the end of 2020. The majority of the dollars here in your capital improvement fund where the bulk of your projects run through. Total fund balance there about 471,000, a decrease of about 51,000. The TIF 3 was closed this year, so you see that deficit was eliminated. You do have TIF 8 that's still out there. Relatively small balance, about $1,200. And then you have your Riverside Revitalization Fund with a deficit of about 142,000. This one's will mainly be funded with future revenue sources. So that's one to keep an eye on with that deficit there. The majority of the funds here are assigned for capital projects into the future. Now you do have 2 debt service funds. You have your 2013 and your 2019 bonds outstanding, total of just over 2.2 million. I think one of the important pieces to note here, which is indicated in the table and that graph, the 2013 bonds do mature in 2024. So you'll see your debt service requirements, your principal and interest do drop significantly in 2025. Those are being paid back mainly with property taxes, I believe some special assessments too. So I think being aware of that's going to be important to manage your tax levy and future projects going forward. The 2019 bonds, they're out to 2030, smaller balance there with about 500,000 remaining at the end of the year. Now moving into your enterprise funds, with both of these funds, we give you a cash flow from operation graph on the top and then a cash balance graph over a 4-year period. The top one's really showing you, are we generating cash from operations and also factoring in the debt service. So the cash coming in is a blue bar, your operating disbursements is a gray bar, and then your debt service, your principal and interest is a green. So here you'll see over the 4-year period, the cash coming in the blue bar did cover the cash going out, which has allowed you to start to build a cash balance in the water fund. You'll see back in 2017, you were at a deficit of 30,000 up to about 292,000 at the end of 2020. Like the general fund, we do put a minimum target balance in there, which is at 50% of your operating costs and your following year's debt service, mainly for cash flow purposes. Anything above that would be for unexpected expenditures or future projects. Now the sewer fund's a little different. You'll see in that bottom graph, the cash has decreased down to about 272,000 in 2020. You see on the top graph, the cash flow from operation has been about even. So the cash coming in has been covering your debt service and your operating costs. The decrease there is mainly some capital projects that you've done over the years. I think the important piece to note here with the sewer fund, there is at the end of the year, over 700,000 of debt, which is significant payments indicated by that green. That debt will be paid off in 2022. So I'd anticipate with no other new debt, you'd start building that cash balance up in 2022. You may go into a deficit, so I think it's important to watch the cash flows in the sewer fund. Now, looking at all those funds we just covered, so this is all the funds of the city and your total cash and investments by each of those types of funds, so your general fund, capital projects, special revenue, the water and sewer or the enterprise funds, and then your debt service funds. So you see cash did decrease from 2018 to 2019, mainly due to funding capital projects, did increase back up in 2020, with the bulk of the cash sitting in the general fund, followed by your debt service funds. Now looking at some key performance indicators. Here, the city of Wabasha is indicated by the blue line. The class 4 cities, so cities with similar population throughout the state of Minnesota. And then the gray is cities within Wabasha County. So here looking at the top one, this is your tax rate, very consistent over the 4 years presented, below the other cities in Wabasha County, a little bit above other cities throughout the state. Your taxes per capita, that number did increase a little bit over the 4-year period, which is consistent with the increase in your tax levy. Now these are two debt service indicators. The top one there is the debt per capita. So as you're paying down that debt and not issuing any new significant debt, you'll see over the 4 years presented there, that number has been going down. Again, that will fluctuate depending on what type of future debt you issue. And then the bottom one's just comparing the principal and interest payments to your other expenditures in the city, fairly consistent with the peer groups presented. A couple expenditure graphs. These include all your governmental funds, so it does not include your water and sewer funds. First one's there is your current expenditures per capita. There we typically see fairly consistent activity, usually slightly increasing like it is for the city of Wabasha. And you're a little bit above both the peer group averages there. The second one on the bottom is your capital expenditures per capita. That'll give you an indication of, when you had some bigger projects going on. So you'll see you had the bigger projects in 2019 with that number being fairly higher compared to the other 3 years presented.
Hey, Andy, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So is there any way that we can get, I see we're higher in current expenditures per capita, capital expenditures, and in tax rate per capita. And that's as we compare ourselves to other cities in Wabasha and other class 4 cities. Is there any way to get any more detailed information to find out why we're higher than those other cities?
Yeah, I mean, you can pull any city numbers, but I think one of the key things is every city doesn't have ambulance service, so you guys are providing ambulance service. You're contracting out some of your fires, so I think those are some of the bigger items that we discussed in the past. But we can, if there's specific questions, we can pull some of that data and get it to Tyler for analysis. So that definitely is an option. We do pull this information from the state auditor's website, so anyone can go on there and look at it too and break down that peer group into any way they want.
Hey,
Okay,
Andy.
thank
Oops. Hey, Andy, could you describe or define how the tax rates, what do you mean when you say tax rate on that previous chart?
So that tax rate is, so you give your tax levy to the county, and they do a tax rate calculation based on the valuation in the city. So that's how it's divided out to all the different properties in the city. And that's gonna, that could fluctuate. We see some big fluctuations from metro cities to more of the rural cities, with the metro cities having newer homes and higher values, and their tax rates a little lower. So I think it's always important to look at not only just the tax rate, but also the dollar amount too. And with any of these peer group comparisons, it's really, you really don't want to take just one, because every city's a little different. I think it's looking at it over time and managing it to the needs of your own city too. And I think this is just one more slide, and then I'll open it up to, any questions anyone may have on the rest of the presentation too. We kind of looked at this one on both the water and sewer slides. It's really looking at how much cash you're generating compared to your debt service payments. So like we saw with the water fund, they're generating sufficient cash to cover operations and debt service. So 380% in 2020. Anything above 100% shows that you're covering operations and debt service. Anything over 100 shows that you have cash coming in for other purposes such as capital. The sewer fund, right about that 100%. It was at 99% in 2019 and 108% in 2020. But like I said, with the sewer fund, I think it's important to be aware that that debt will be gone at the end of 2022. So with that, I'd take any other questions anyone has.
Thank you, Andy. We appreciate this. Any questions for Andy regarding the audit findings? Or staff questions for that matter? All right.
Excuse me.
Yes, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking at the big financial report you have here, and on page 21, when you do government-wide financial analysis, I just want some clarification. It says there, in the case of the city, assets and deferred inflows of resources exceeded liabilities and deferred outflows of resources by 18 million or something at the close of the most recent year. And I think you're talking about the net position. But on the bottom of the page in the tabulated figure, the total net position is 11 million. I'm just kind of wondering how that works.
So the 18 million is a combination of your governmental activities, or all your governmental funds, and then you'll see that same table as the business type activities. If you add the two together, you'll get to the 18.6 million.
So I have a question too on page 100. There's some findings, financial report preparation. Could you expound upon that a little bit? It sounds like we don't have enough internal controls.
Yeah, so the financial report preparation, I think that's very common. That's there's 3 levels of findings. There's control deficiencies, significant deficiencies, and material weaknesses. This one's not elevated to a material weakness due to the review the city staff does prior to the report being issued. I don't see this as a red flag or negative, very common in small to medium-sized organizations, not just cities. The material audit adjustment one is really related to reconciling your bank and all your investments to your general ledger, your financial software. So that one's a material audit adjustment. So we came in and had to make some adjustments there. This is the one that really should be fixed going forward. And like I mentioned, Tyler's in the process of, understanding what he needs to do and get this corrected.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good. Anything further, counselor, staff? Just trying to make sure I'm not getting a chat. Okay, Andy, we really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Caroline, welcome. I'd be happy to have a discussion with you at any time over the financial stuff and get you up to speed too.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. And I'll be joining the training as well.
Super. Very good. Okay, and we have appeal of the Board of Adjustment decision on the variance for 227 Coffee Mill Drive. And I see we have the applicants with us. So we have in our packet, let me bring it up, it's significant.
Emily, don't we have to make a motion and accept?
To approve it. Yes, thank you. I'm so wrapped. Yes, we absolutely do. Do we have a motion to approve the audit? Thank you.
I'll make that motion to accept the audit.
Super. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Tim. Any further discussion? We'll vote by roll.
Woodley,
Yes.
Sella,
Yes.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Falcom,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Walrick,
Yes.
Duran.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. I get into sort of a Zoom trance sometimes. So before us now, we have the appeal for the Board of Adjustment decision. This was a February 24th applicant submission to the Board of Adjustment for a zoning variance to be considered at their March meeting. And the variance was denied. The motion concluded the variance did not meet practical difficulties standards, which are established in our code and in state statute. So we have an appeal to that decision, which is allowable. And maybe Harry, do you want to, I think Harry or Wendy probably wants to tee this up a little bit for us. There's lots of attached information, including the applicant's information. But Harry, do you want to give us a little bit of background contextually? Because it's obviously it's a procedural thing here, as well as a need to be clear that our own code is appropriate.
Sure, yes. Thank you, Mayor. Can everyone hear me?
Great, yep.
Okay. I apologize if you hear thunder. There's a thunderstorm outside my window. Yes, so Mayor Duran described the situation or the background for this particular appeal very well. So in terms of the applicant's request, they've stated in their letter of appeal that they believe the BOA's motion and decision were based on the exposure or the city's liability as a main consideration instead of the required practical difficulties test for denying that variance. The applicant also cites a few other examples of building placement and aesthetics in the neighborhood that no neighbors and that no neighbors made objections to the request. So in terms of updates to this appeal as well as the report, Wendy and I got together with the city attorney, and after reviewing the report, we do have a few corrections that we do want to make. With the city attorney, we established that a plain reading of the code would require that the front setback for an accessory structure is the front plane or the established setback line set by the location of the principal structure. So to explain this, in this particular situation, the applicant, Mr. Perry, has built a home in 2016, and based on our building permit records, that home is 30 feet away from the front property line. Wabasha code will require that the accessory structure must be built behind the principal structure, wherever that structure happens to be built. So since a house is 30 feet away from the line, any accessory structures would need to be built behind the principal structure or 30 feet and 1 inch from the front property line. So we do want to update that the variance proposal should be updated to reflect this code requirement, and that the applicant is also still required to get a variance in order to build the proposed garage on the subject property. I do have in the packet for you, Exhibit B, Table 1 shows exactly what the request is, and the variance now is 10 feet and 1 inch as established where the home on the property is. So with the update to the variance amount, we do want to update a few other things that we previously addressed in the staff report in order to make sure that all of the findings now reflect this 10-foot variance and the 30-foot setback established by the existing home. So first finding is, the property in question cannot be put to a reasonable use if it's used under conditions allowed by the official controls because of the particular physical surrounding shape or topographical conditions of the specific property involved, where practical difficulty to the owner is distinguished from just a mere inconvenience. So what this is saying is that there has to be something particularly special about this property in order for the applicant or about the property or about the specific situation that they're in order to be granted a variance, or for that situation to be considered a practical difficulty in order to be granted a variance. So the update to this one is just that, it's updating to the 30-foot that's established by the existing home. Our finding on this is still that the proposal does not demonstrate a clear practical difficulty, and that the reasoning behind the request is closer to an inconvenience to the property owner. Property owner has the ability to build this accessory structure well outside of the established setbacks. The second condition, which a petition for the variance is based on a unique property or extraordinary circumstance not created by the landowner. That part is particularly key. We do acknowledge that there is a large part of the subject property that's encumbered by steep slopes, but we can't identify any extraordinary circumstances that are unique to the property or to the situation. So we do not find that particular finding in favor of the applicant. There were no changes from the report. The third finding also does not have any changes, and to quickly summarize it, economic considerations alone cannot constitute a practical difficulty. And the applicant has included in their request an economic-based argument without an identifiable practical difficulty. And so we feel this question is inadequately answered by the applicant, and therefore they do not meet this finding. Fourth is that the granting of the variance will not alter the essential character of the locality. And so there were a few things that we changed to this, mostly just to reflect this 30-foot variance or the 30-foot setback. But to summarize the finding, looking at other properties nearby, we don't think that a accessory structure close to the road would be detrimental to the public welfare or interest to other properties. So there are some situations and contexts where an almost 1,000 square foot garage may not adequately address the question of, does it change the essential character of the locality? But we don't see this proposal as altering that. This next finding is that the variation will not impair an adequate supply of light and air to the adjacent property. There were no changes to this. It would not cause some sort of impairity or impair an adjacent property. Finding 6, whether the variance request is the minimum variance, which would alleviate the practical difficulties. The applicant has not demonstrated a clear case of practical difficulties, even with the variance expanding from 5 feet to 10 feet and 1 inch. It cannot be considered a minimally necessary variance in order to make reasonable use of the property. As stated above, the applicant could build it outside of setbacks. For the 7th finding, no order of the Board of Adjustment granting a variance shall be valid for a period longer than 6 months. This will be a requirement with the condition or with conditions of approval. So the third thing that we would like to change with the report on advice of the city attorney was to make 2 additional findings in order to be compliant with the requirements of the of Minnesota state statutes. And so one of them is whether the variance is in harmony with general purposes and intent of the ordinance. And the second is whether the variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan. In terms of whether the variance is in harmony with general purpose and intent of the ordinance, because the applicant is very, very deliberately placing this accessory structure before the principal structure and not providing some sort of practical difficulty or some sort of unique situation to this particular request, we don't feel like that the proposal is in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the ordinance, and therefore it doesn't meet this finding. And then with the whether the variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan, we did review the comprehensive plan, the Wabasha comprehensive plan, for policies or information that might be applicable to this proposal. Just to kind of summarize it, we were not able to find anything specific about accessory structures being behind existing homes, or for particular consistent development patterns within neighborhoods. And so we were not able to find anything within the comprehensive plan that this would violate. So with the 2 above findings, staff is still recommending that the proposed variance does not meet criteria for practical difficulties and therefore should be denied. So this next section here, so in terms of reviewing the appeal set by the applicant, all of that sort of taken into account, the applicant did state at the beginning that they believe the BOA's motion and decision was based on exposure or city liability as the main consideration instead of the required practical difficulties. Staff did not find this to be the case, either looking at the minutes or during the meeting. The minutes do reflect some discussion about the legal liabilities in granting the applicant's proposal. This was not the motion that they voted upon. And so the motion did not include any language about legal liabilities as a reason to deny the variance. And so the approved motion to deny the variance was based on a failure of the proposal to meet the practical difficulties criteria. There's a little bit more that I could talk about with this particular finding, but that's kind of a good summary to it. To the applicant's second point about 2 examples of development in the area where neighbors have asked how can that be allowed while the BOA denied their proposal or the subject proposal. We don't see how these reference properties and situations are at all comparable to the current matter before the City Council. Both of these properties are permitted garages that are currently the principal structure on the property, since they both lack homes. And so with circumstances being different and without going into specific detail about how these other 2 properties differ from the applicant's property, really what should be considered here is the subject property and the request in front of you. And so, we just don't see any similarities that the applicant is suggesting between the 2 reference properties and the subject property. In terms of the third item that the applicant brought up in the appeal, we can verify that no neighbors asked questions or submitted comments, whether in opposition or in favor, other than the lady that spoke tonight in favor of the variance. So no public comment was heard at the BOA meeting, and although neighborhood input is an identified cornerstone of citizen engagement and the public process, particularly with local government, city codes and state statutes are pretty clear when it comes to a zoning variance, and that no matter how much or how little public comment is received on an item, the BOA and the local government must still make a determination that are based in terms of granting or denying a variance, make a determination based on findings of practical difficulty. You cannot base it just on public comment alone. So our recommendation is still the same. Both staff and the Board of Adjustments recommend denial of this appeal because it does not demonstrate the practical difficulties to be granted a variance. The resolution that is included in your packet does allow City Council, if they do find in favor of this variance, in order to come up with specific findings for each of the required findings set by the state that must be provided in order to grant a variance. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Harry. Questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So I think I read somewhere, and let me know if I'm correct, that the normal setback on this street is 25 feet. But because the Perrys put their house at 30 feet, that now moves the setback to 30 feet. Is that right?
That would be correct.
So what about if they built their house at 25 feet, then they could put their garage at 25 feet. Is that correct?
They would have to put it at 25 and 1 inch, but generally, yes.
Okay.
What you're saying is correct.
So really what we're talking about to me is, it sounds like 25 feet meets the normal setback, and they want to move it 5 feet at 20 feet. And you want them to put it at 30 feet plus 1 inch. So I'm wondering, can we come up with some type of a middle ground where we can say, okay, 30's out, but 20's out, but how about 25?
In making some sort of resolution, I'm not sure exactly how you could do that based on the requirements set by the state in reviewing an appeal. I would suggest in this case to review the applicant's request as it's proposed by the applicant, and to make a decision based on what the applicant has proposed.
Well, I'm all for making it as easy as possible, but I guess what I'm falling on is the 25 foot is the actual setback. If the Perrys had built their house at 25 feet and then decided to put their garage at 25 feet, we wouldn't be here. Everything would be in accordance. So I'm also looking at this as it's on the end of a golf course. There are no other houses nearby except as you go to would it be the west or north? And they're behind some trees. So what I'm looking at here is that if you move the garage 5 feet, it doesn't really make much of a difference aesthetically or safety wise. And that's what I'm looking at.
Harry, can I ask a naive question? Since I haven't been a planning commissioner like a lot of other members of council. I guess what strikes me is if it's not going to alter the essential character and it's not going to impair adjacent property, air and light, why is the zoning set that way? I mean, I guess do we have the correct zoning on those parcels? I'm not even sure quite how to ask the question, but to the public comment, it's the nature of those homes on that edge of the city certainly have a different quality and lot size, et cetera, than in our urban plan. So while the setback is really critical in the urban plan, it seems like it doesn't seem relevant to the essential character or the health and safety piece of it. Can you just educate me a little bit about that? Is the zoning, is it a zoning? Do we have a little issue there with how it's zoned?
In terms of, whether or not the property is correctly zoned, I'm not sure if I'm able to make, I'm not sure if I'm able to, how do I put this? The map as currently shown in our GIS and on the official zoning map, I'm going to assume that is correct and that everything has been updated. And so I wouldn't be able to at this time be able to do research quickly enough in order to actually go back through history to determine if the property is indeed zoned R2. But at least in terms of whether or not the zoning code is correct, each municipality sets their setbacks and accessory structures setbacks. And so when R2 was either amended or adopted, the accessory structure setback was put in very deliberately. I would see that as a aesthetic part of what a city is allowed to do with their zoning code, to require an accessory structure be either in a side yard or in a backyard of a property, and instead of in front of a house. And so that is a deliberate decision by a city council, whether it was somewhat recent or pretty long ago. But that is the established zoning code. I don't have the ability to either administratively or even in state statute recommend another route that this applicant could take. They have not shown that there's a practical difficulty on the property, and that is a key part of what they have to establish in order for them to be granted a variance. So that's, I can't do anything but what's currently in the zoning code.
Harry, can I jump in and comment on this too? Just so to Craig's point about could it be put at 25 versus 30 feet? That would still require a variance, regardless of how much variance you're talking about. It still requires a variance. So you still need to meet the practical difficulties if you're granting a variance, no matter how big the variance is. And correct me if I'm wrong, Harry, the way I'm seeing this is the biggest issue here is that they could place a structure on the lot that would not require a variance, that would meet the required setback. And they have failed to demonstrate how the property is unique and prevents them from doing that.
That would be correct.
That's the biggest issue here, is that it isn't about the amount of the variance. The fact is they're asking for a variance and they haven't shown why they can't or are unable to build the structure without a variance. And that's the practical difficulty that they would need to show that they haven't demonstrated. And I don't believe you can make an arbitrary decision about that. They need to demonstrate that there is a practical difficulty and they could not place the structure and meet the setback.
That'd be correct. The only thing that I would add is that, if the council does see fit to grant the variance, you would have to come up with findings that met the practical, you would have to establish why you think that this particular property has a practical difficulty.
I think we're making a mountain out of molehill here. There is a problem with them moving back to the 30-foot line and that they're going to have increased fill needed. So there'll be an increased slope there. And it's not an undoable thing, but nevertheless, it is going to be, wouldn't be as easy if it was at 25 or even at 20. I'm not really in favor of 20, but I could go 25, but you know, this is what you have, 60 some pages on this variance. I mean, it shouldn't be that difficult for a garage that's out in the middle of, adjacent to a golf course on a street that has minimal traffic. So what the problem is, I'm not exactly sure why we would want to control this that much. So that, just my thoughts.
How are you doing?
Yeah, this isn't like on Lawrence Boulevard or anything where it would actually make some sense to have this where it's a, you know, a congested area with a lot of housing, but this is on a freaking golf course, you know. So anyways, like I said, this doesn't, this is getting way more effort than it should have. This isn't a big, this isn't a 50,000 per person town. And this is like bureaucratic nonsense and being very heavy handed. We shouldn't be that way to our people in town.
Personally have no issue with seeing this garage built up to the 20-foot setback. Can everybody hear me okay?
You're good.
Personally, I don't think it's a big deal for all the reasons that everybody has listed as far as, you know, where it is and being on the golf course and in aspects unique to the property. I mean, it seems like it isn't a big deal, and common sense tells me that. And I want to work with the landowner just as much as everybody else. But you know, what we're handed here is what I'm stuck on is how state statute controls how we go about doing this. And I've seen it in every town I've been in private work, on both sides of the table. And this practical difficulty language is not unique to this situation at all. This is in every single variance meeting. And so I want to vote, let's go, let's allow this to happen, but we need to detail out the findings before we can vote yes to do it. You know, if the practical difficulty is the slope of the driveway, that needs to be established. And really, we have to sit here and go one by one through these findings and essentially write them right now if we're gonna pass it. And if we don't have the findings, then we're not in compliance with state statute. If anything I said there isn't correct, I'm not an expert, but please feel free to correct me. But you know, that's just my experience. So, I mean, if we wanna do this, let's write the findings and get it done, or find a way to come up with the findings. But one thing that has always resonated is we can't be arbitrary. We can't say I'm in favor of this, it's not a big deal, and have no findings. That's not an option. We have to have findings.
So Brian, this is Mike Flaherty, the attorney. Can everybody hear me?
Thanks, Mike. Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I sort of agree with both comments of Craig, all three comments. You know, I think that when the legislature wrote this law, it was based on two cases called Stadsvold and Krummenacher, and they repealed the prior standard. And then after the Supreme Court did, and then next year, the legislature adopted this, and they didn't make an allowance for a serious case or a non-serious case. It's one standard for all variances. And so then what you're left with is complicated ones like regarding feedlot variances that can be incredibly complex, where it doesn't seem like a mountain out of a molehill. And then you're left with the garage case, but it's one standard. And what Brian, and so then I also agree with Brian said, that's the standard you have to meet. And my main issue, I wasn't contacted about this till after the planning commission meeting, but it's just important to me that, I don't really care what you find on pretty much anything, but I do care that the process is followed, because that's, I'm asked about process, that's kind of my domain. So what Brian said about making the findings on the criteria, that's accurate. You just got, whatever you decide, you have to make findings. So, and I've done one litigation case, kind of complex litigation case. And so the main important things with findings, I'll just talk 1 minute, then if anybody has questions, they can ask me questions, but you have to make findings based on facts that are in the record of the proceedings, is what the court says. And so that can be anything. It can be something somebody testified to, such as the applicant. It can be a like the staff report, and it also could be your own personal knowledge. Like, for example, I lived on the golf course for 25 years. I don't live there now, but I know the area well. If you're going to make a finding like that, you just state what the basis of knowledge is to make the finding. And then it's in the record of the proceedings, because it's on the tape. And so what I run into, though, is when the mountain of the molehill issue, I mean, when you're so used to doing the variances one way and you don't really make a big deal out of it, when you get the feedlot case, you're not prepared, because you haven't had the repetition of doing it the right way every time. And so that's why I encourage just, doing a resolution, making the findings, that's what's required under law, which is, I have to tell you that, but just as a logistics of operating city government, you can do more work or less work on one of these, that's fine. But at the end of the day, no matter how much work you do on it, at the end of the day, you got to make findings. And so I pretty much wholeheartedly agree with what Brian said. It's fine to grant, it's fine to deny it. I haven't really parsed the exact logic here, as much as Harry has, but I get that it's not a complicated issue. It's a garage 5 feet too far one way from the setback. So those are my comments. I was at the Orinoco City Council meeting that went an hour later than I thought it was going to go, so I didn't hear the beginning, but if you have questions, I can answer those.
Hey, Mike, does being a home rule charter city give us any leeway or flexibility in this issue at all?
No, that's a great question. It does not. And in fact, there is some inconsistency in your code between state law and your code. And so then the rule is, and that was about the case I litigated, they used the wrong legal standard. So if your code is outdated, the rule is you have to follow state statute. It preempts your code. If your code has additional requirements, that's okay. You can add additional requirements, but you at least have to do what's in state statute. And, but no, the charter, it's all state law. Once those cases came down, that statute preempted everything local, inconsistent with state law.
Okay, so, any other further questions? I was just going to kind of.
I have a thought.
Go ahead, please.
If I may.
Yes, please, John.
I know we can't do spot zoning. I don't remember I don't know how big of a swath that is up there with R2. And I don't know what R3 is. But could we look at, it seems like that whole area up there might be zoned inappropriately. Could we, vote to support the denial, but then go back and rezone it so he can go ahead and build it where he needs to build it? Because based on this finding, or based on this applicant, we realized that that area up there maybe isn't zoned as appropriately as it might need to be, or it could be. And I can't remember what's going on up there. But I do know as we did the zoning back in the early 2000s, and then I think again it was done very recently. It's hard because R2, okay, and then try to apply that across all these varying size lots and shapes and things like that. So it makes some sense, but we do need to be consistent. And that's one thing that's weird about planning is that the creative part is in the planning part. We have to follow what's been codified once it's been once we're done planning it. So I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that, or Harry, if you know, if we can do that. We've rezoned other areas to accommodate certain things. I know we did that in the past, so just a thought.
This is Dean. I would agree with you, John. I drove up there, and it does not make sense to deny something like this in that area where obviously it's not on Main Street or 2nd Street or 3rd Street or anything like that. We ran into a problem, or I know of a problem that was down in the same parade similar to this, and it was denied on this very same aspect. They ended up building the garage where they were told to, but that resulted in problems in erosion and stuff like that, and it should have never, the county should have never done it, and I don't think we should either. So I think we really need to look at that area up there and other areas like it in Wabasha.
Is that alternate process outlined by John within our grasp?
Does the alternate process fix the issue too?
No, because if you zone it R1, you're still going to have the same issue if you zone it R2. So from my understanding and what I'm looking at right now, it's still the same step back for R1. It's still behind the principal structure, so that doesn't solve the problem. I'm with, so either we R1 or R2, so, and it's just a little corner of that area that's R2 where Perry's house is. Otherwise, all of Alpine up there is R2, which makes sense because there's multiple houses back there, multiple structures, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have R1 or R2 where Perry's live, but changing to R1 is not going to help, at least from my understanding of the code here. I agree with Brian. I mean, I'm happy to work with them. My struggle is that we have volunteers that had a thorough review of this at the Board of Adjustment, made a decision on the findings, and now all of a sudden we absolutely throw all that out and then just approve it to approve it, which I don't agree with. I'm much more, let's have a finding of if the slope is too bad, we have to have more fill and it's going to cost the project 3 times as much. That's a finding to me, and that's somewhat more practical, but I don't, of all the stuff I've seen, I don't have that data in front of me. So I would much rather table it for a month, get it all fixed, find a solution and come back and approve it. That's my opinion. I don't want to just say deny it and we have no recourse or nothing else to do, because I don't think that's appropriate either. So I'm much more in the realm of let's find a solution that actually is worthwhile. I don't like the idea of spot zoning because we try to get away from that as much as possible with the new codes and stuff like that. So we try to really rectify all that the last time we did all the upgrades to the zoning. So that's just my 2 cents worth, but I'm happy to, if I'm wrong, please correct me if that's the case.
I'd like to table it and see if we can come up with something that's going to work. There is, like you say, there is going to have to be greater fill if they move back to the 30-foot 1-inch line.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that maybe there's the potential difficulty item could be satisfied by the pretty high increase on construction materials due to the COVID this year. I mean, that's a practical difficulty in my mind.
Do we have a procedural timeline that would make that a feasible motion?
So you have to act on this within 60 days. You can extend it for an additional 60 days. Harry knows the details if there's time enough to extend it. I don't know.
That extension, what does that take? Does that take a motion? Or does that extension have to come from the planning board?
No, the city can just send a letter to the applicant saying we extend the 60-day rule for an additional 60 days to do more due diligence review, which is done and almost very frequently done. They might have already extended it. I don't know. It might be in the staff report, I think, but So if you wanted to do that, you would make a motion to postpone this issue until whatever date of the next meeting. It's not a tabling because you're not taking it up at the same meeting. You're going to take it up at a different meeting. So you could make a motion to postpone the agenda item until May, whatever the May meeting is. But you can only do that if you have time within the statute to do it. And I don't know the answer to that.
Mayor Durand.
Yes.
So it looks like we received the appeal on March 15th. So that, if we're going 60 days, that puts it, middle of May. So I'm blanking on when the next city council meeting date
Before
is.
that, first week of May.
Yeah, I'll be before.
So in that
That's-
case, I would still send the letter extending it, but obviously we all know it'll be happen in May, but in case something happens, it's just like a precautionary measure to send the letter.
Yep. I hear consensus in the spirit of this. I think we just need to discuss the protocol that we need to, follow essentially. So with that, is there further question or do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to extend it out for the 60-day limit till whatever in March.
We have a motion from Craig and we have a second from Jeff, and I heard recommendation from Mike that we still send the letter. Any further discussion, or we'll vote by roll?
Mayor,
Yes, thank you, Brian.
would you ask that we work with the applicant
Please.
to investigate practical difficulties on the lot?
Yes.
What might be a condition?
I'm going to say, as a citizen, this kind of stuff makes me insane because, it's like, what is a practical difficulty if people who day in and day out have to deal with this can't really define it. I hear Brian kind of struggling. It's like pornography. You'll know it when you see it. Is that kind of what we're dealing with? So I think that would be very helpful.
Good. Hi, this is Jim Perry. I didn't know if you guys at some point were going to ask if my wife or I had anything to say or add input here.
Sure, Jim, you sure can.
Well, first of all, I have to say that it's kind of been resonated by a few of the comments made tonight. It just amazes me that this has become such a big deal. I mean, at the Board of Adjustment hearing, there were 3 votes denying, 2 votes in favor, but there was an awful lot of discussion, despite what I heard tonight by Harry Davis. There was an awful lot of discussion of warning if the variance requests were granted, that it would provide some exposure to the city and set a precedent and so on and so forth. So here we are tonight. And again, I thought this was a pretty simple thing. I can tell you I felt somewhat blindsided when I saw the report that was provided to all of you at the council. There were things in there, as Harry Davis described at the onset, changes made. I can tell you this reference to, it's now really a variance of 10 feet 1 inch. That was never brought up at the Board of Adjustment meeting. And quite frankly, there are practical difficulties because of the slope. They spent an awful lot of time at that Board of Adjustment meeting bringing up topographical maps. Clearly, there's like a 10% slope as it is. It drops off, and the Board of Adjustment all saw it on the topographical. If we were to go back to that 30 feet or whatever it is, 30 feet and 1 inch, it starts dropping off considerably more. So it just, to me, this is not a cookie cutter. I know you guys have to have codes and ordinances, but to me, this is not 12th Street. There's never going to be another house to the left of us or to the right of us. We have woods, golf course. Everybody in the neighborhood was amazed that it was going to require this because they saw no problem with it. However, they did point out problems with, and some of those examples that were downplayed as being not at all applicable. The one really bothers some of the folks up there, and it would bother me if I lived next to it. It's on Alpine Ridge, and it is a secondary structure. Well, presumably that means there's going to be a primary structure at some point in time. But if it's a secondary structure, isn't there a required minimum setback that applies nonetheless? It didn't. That is within the 25-foot setback from the road right of way. You can see it by the picture. There's a telephone pole, which is usually set right on the property line. And on top of all that, the neighbors in that area, much less Lori and I, we didn't receive any notice of a request for a variance to be granted for that structure to be built. So, you know, I guess to me, it's a simple, what we were asking for is the city to work with us. We're trying to improve the value of our property. You know, it's, we were asking for a 5-foot variance from what would be otherwise a 20, what we thought, and the only thing we heard at the Board of Adjustment meeting, a 25-foot setback requirement from the road right of way. And so, as I think the documents I provided, if, as I had requested, a 5-foot variance were granted under that scenario, we're still 43 feet back from the edge of the pavement. Look at the picture of that structure that was built that's not at all applicable, apparently. I can tell you that that's much closer, and the picture should depict that. So to me, I think that I thought that city has discretion here to work with the citizens, work with somebody who's asking for something to be done within reason. You know, I did hear an awful lot of talk about, you know, at the Board of Adjustment, advising the chairman to not grant this variance because of potential exposure. And truthfully, Mayor, with all due respect, I think that it would be appropriate to ask that you recuse yourself from voting on this issue, because I'm appealing a decision made by the board that your husband was the chairperson of. And quite frankly,
I'll talk to Mike about that, Jim. I don't see a conflict there, but I'll talk to Mike about that. But just to be clear, we're sympathetic to what you're saying. We do wish to work with you. Brian's offer to make that happen is how that's going to occur. We have, you know, limitations on our authority. We want to work with our citizens for sure. We do have to satisfy state law. So that's the part that constrains us a bit. But to Brian's comments, we can sit here and try to do it, but we're going to do a better job if we do the due diligence and establish those findings and bring that back for a clear report. I think that the spirit, I don't see any, I haven't heard one person disagree with that sentiment. So I think we're on the right track.
okay. Well,
Yeah,
I can tell you that everybody who's driven or knows that area, Coffee Mill Drive comes down at a slope from Highway 60. It's a continuous slope all the way down to Alpine Ridge. Our house happened to be built 30 feet back from the road right of way. Unbeknownst to us, if we wanted to put a secondary structure, this business of it being 1 inch behind our existing structure would truly create problems, because it really drops off on this small lot that we're now talking about building on. But anybody who stands on Coffee Mill Drive can see that it drops both ways. It goes down from Coffee Mill Drive into the property we're talking about building on. And as a result, we're going to have to build a driveway. You know, Dan Miller came up there with his transom early on to try and get an elevation. And he says, you got about a 10% slope here in the area in which we're talking about building in. It starts going down even a greater slope than that the further back we go. And as it is, we're going to have to build a driveway coming down from Coffee Mill Drive, creating a valley coming back up to the garage to let the water run off. And we can't determine an elevation until we can determine the location of where this garage could be structured. So I just didn't think this was a big deal, quite frankly. I mean, I was asking for 5 feet. The fact that nobody objected in the neighborhood, we're improving things. I hope we can work together.
I would say I was up there on Sunday. You guys weren't there. This is why you're talking. And if you move that, in my opinion, if you move that garage back any further than what you're asking, you're going to have erosion problems. And if you go off in the wintertime, if you go off that driveway sideways, you're going to be skidding down an awful long hill with your vehicle.
Thank you.
So I see that as a problem up there, but unfortunately, we got to follow the zoning rules and regulations, and they don't make sense in your case. They do make sense, like I said, in town, on certain streets and so forth and so on. But in your case, in my eye, it doesn't make any sense. But let's extend it 60 days and see what we can come up with.
Yep. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Or we'll take a roll vote.
Can you read the resolution so we know what we're voting on?
We're voting to extend the period 60 days.
So, Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
what I would suggest is just make a motion to postpone action on resolution 2021 dash whatever it is until the May City Council meeting.
And our resolution, the packet's not numbered.
Oh, well, okay, the resolution regarding the Perry variance request until the May meeting.
So that's what we have. We would entertain a motion to act on the resolution regarding the Perry property until the May regular council meeting.
I'll make the motion again.
We have that motion again.
Second
by Craig, and a second from Jeff. And we'll vote by roll.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Woodley,
Yes.
Stella,
Yes.
Falcon,
Yes.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Duran.
Yes. Thank you, Jim and Lori. Yeah, this is one of those things, nobody likes it to be more complex than it seems it needs to be. And we'll have staff reach out.
Can I ask one last thing? This May meeting you're referring to, am I correct? Is it like May 6th? I don't know the date, you know?
It's the first Tuesday at 7 o'clock. It's our regularly scheduled meeting. May 4th, 7 p.m.
Well, and hopefully I can work with whoever. I heard Brian's name mentioned. I'd be happy to work with whoever I can work with on this, but Lori and I are both, I don't think we're going to be able to even participate by way of Zoom on May 4th. We're going to be, with a little luck, somewhere on a boat a long ways away. But
So, Mr. Perry,
yes,
this is the city attorney speaking. If you can't appear, if you want to supplement the record, like you want to make additional arguments or something like that, you can make a written, just write something to the city and they'll include it in the packet. And then they can use your additional statements or whatever, or information as additional basis when they consider it.
okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. All right. Thanks, everybody. And, thanks to the Board of Adjustment too. I echo Tim's, comment that, that they're stuck in the same position we are. They also need to satisfy statute. So appreciate that time. All right. And we have now a comp plan update. Also, Harry's going to discuss that item so we can be thinking in a forward fashion about the comp plan and potential updates. Go ahead, Harry.
Mayor Duran, I'm going to share my screen here.
Super.
Okay, could everyone see that? Okay.
Good.
Yeah, thank you all. I am just going to discuss a little bit about a potential comprehensive plan update and maybe some suggested areas that we could revisit as a part of a comp plan update. To give you some background, in the early part of of 2021, sort of January, February, I met with Wendy Bush, city clerk, to discuss the comprehensive plan and maybe some desired updates, which might help devise some sort of scope for an update. And so we determined that instead of coming up with a scope and some sort of full proposal for you all, we would instead offer this memo and this presentation in order to ask for some direction on where you all would like to go in terms of a comprehensive plan update, if that's what you all would like to do. In terms of kind of what I'm going to talk about today, I'm just going to give an overall view of what goes into an update, some suggested chapters and items that I think would be valuable in order to update as a part of this process, and then just our overall recommendation on how you move forward. So in terms of comprehensive plans, it's very common to, after 5 years, things may have changed, new projects may have come up. In order to capture any changes that are a part of a part of a community, 5 years is a very common time frame in order to for a city to review the comprehensive plan and consider an update. And so you can include projects that the city have done, projects that have been privately done but have a pretty big impact. Any of that can go into a comprehensive plan update. But what is, I think, in terms of this comprehensive plan, this guiding document for how a city moves forward, this 5-year update can reaffirm city goals, city priorities, and can guide you for the next 5 years and beyond. So, even if, say, Wabasha doesn't do an update, now or within 5 years, but maybe considers 10 years, you're still setting the framework in order for this comprehensive plan to help guide even well beyond what might be common for a city to update. And I do want to just kind of what's down there at the bottom. You're not required to update the plan. The state does not require you to embark upon this process. It would be something that if you wanted to do, we're happy to help you figure out how to go about it. So in terms of what we had identified as priority chapters that we could update, there were 4 of them: Parks and Recreation, Transportation Circulation, Economic Development, and then Land Use and Zoning. So with parks, we might consider referencing the ongoing Parks Master Plan update. With Transportation Circulation, we might look at conducting a policies and practices evaluation in order to assess ADA accessibility and to recommend policies going forward that would help ADA accessibility across the community. You might include any transit options that become available, either regionally or within the county. With the economic chapter, you might be looking at this future port proposal that's going along the river, a little bit west of downtown. And with land use, we're looking at potentially, the port and maybe a few other places, some changes in terms of, the intended land use of these properties. And so we want to make sure that we're encompassing that as a part of the comprehensive plan. One really good example is this Minnesota Futures project for the athletic fields, in order to figure out a way, once the athletic fields are moved to a different property, how do you then at that point take a property and make it reusable. And so this also includes a reroute of Highway 60. And so you know, it kind of hits a few different chapters in terms of the impact, but you know, this particular project or this particular idea can be encompassed as a part of the comprehensive plan and made at, you know, a priority of some sort moving forward. So there are a few other things that could be updated as well, you know, just kind of basic demographic and household information. Things have changed in 5 years. You know, you might look at some of the action items that were in the original comprehensive plan and say, yeah, we completed that. That's, you know, we're done. You know, we can maybe look at some new action items or you know, recommend some new policies. With a comprehensive plan update, you could also include public engagement. The original comprehensive plan did include a lot of public engagement, you know, a lot of time spent in the community, talking to people, trying to figure out, you know, what's people's vision for Wabasha going forward. But this public engagement is not required as a part of the update. So in terms of our recommendation, we just suggest reviewing some of these suggestions, you know, and then, you know, perhaps discussing and, you know, sort of talk either, you know, among city council or both plan commission and city council to figure out, you know, what are some priorities that you all would like to update as a part of a comprehensive plan update, and then, you know, provide us some guidance so that we can come up with, you know, a scope and a proposal for you all. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Yeah, this is Moyer, Dean Moyer. I would want public input on this as we have done in the past.
Yeah, this is Craig Fulcum. So I worked on that comp plan before quite a bit. And that's one of the criticisms that we had was we didn't have enough public participation. We had a couple of meetings and they were lecture type meetings. This is what we're going to do, blah, blah, blah. But when it came time to ask for input from the audience, the citizens that were participating, that was shortchanged. So I think we need to get participation by the citizenry, and we need to allow time for them to make that input.
I don't think anything's been budgeted for 2021 for this comp plan review. But I mean, if you guys, I'd be perfectly happy with letting them go ahead and make a proposal. I don't know how much, Craig, do you know how much it cost last time?
No, I don't know, but it did take up quite a bit of time.
I can partially answer that. I think last time you have a certain amount budgeted for consulting planning services. And I think last time when Christy was working on this, she basically fit that into her budgeted time and hours related to your consulting planning services. So that would be one of the decisions you'd have to make is how do you want Harry to spend his time related to services to the city if he's spending time on the comprehensive plan update versus other things, and then what does that mean for how long that process would take?
Yeah, I think, I was with Craig when we did this in 2016, and we absolutely overhauled the whole thing. I mean, every section, every chapter, everything. I agree. We asked for public input. We didn't get any. I think this should just go back to the planning commission and just kind of update it as we see fit. I guess my only question about a comp plan, do we want to put things in a comp plan that potentially will happen in the future? Or, I mean, because some of the stuff is not guaranteed it's going to happen, or at least in the next 5 years. So I was just curious about that, but I'm more than happy to tackle this at planning, because I'm sure that's probably where it should go, and, you know, make proposals and make changes at that point and go from there. So, and Harry, I don't know if you have a comment on the future part of it, but I'm happy to put the stuff in there, but I just want to make sure it's kind of feasible to do that on a comp plan.
I'll comment a little bit on that,
yeah.
and maybe Brian will back me up here. I think that, when we look at funding proposals, we're going to increasingly see that if these activities that we propose and request funding for are not in our comprehensive plan, we can forget about them getting funded. So even if they are aspirational, and we don't have a clear line of how the financials stack up, we better get them in there, or we won't see there won't be a financial stack. So that would be my
Absolutely agree.
my point. I appreciate this. Thanks, Harry. I don't know that there's strong opinion. It sounds like always citizen engagement is good. But to Tim's point, it's hard to get it. People say they want it, then they don't participate, or they don't remember participating, or it's complex. Obviously, that takes a lot of time and involvement just to get the participants, the engagement piece to occur. I will say there was public engagement on the Greater Minnesota Futures Project, and so that research team can compile some of the findings that were relevant to some of these areas that Harry has outlined for us, including economic development, and obviously the part that the schematic that they came up with for the athletic field. So there's some there that's relatively recent. And the Port Authority had sort of surveyed people on Facebook, and there was quite a lot of feedback there too. Sometimes hard to distill, unclear sometimes whether you're dealing with citizens and residents or people who used to live here and care about this community. But nonetheless, there's quite a rich narrative there. So there's lots of different ways to go about that engagement piece. And I know Caroline has background there as well. Tim, I hear you saying, as Planning Commission, you'd be willing to let this become a priority for discussing which sections seem to need updating first, for instance?
Yeah, I think we could go along with the discussion of what Harry proposes and staff propose. I think we could tackle that, and we could just look and see if there are other things. What I really don't want to do is overhaul the whole thing, because we had an extensive overhaul the last time we did it, but I'm more than happy to start the conversation and just kind of tackle it as we need, and set a time frame of when we want this done by, so we actually get it done, and move from there. So I'm happy to put it on the Planning Commission's agenda.
One thing that I'd request you consider, and this is informal, but it's just I get much more feedback from citizens about trees than I do about taxes. And I don't know if there's a way to get a forestry element in the park plan. I don't know that would be terribly complex. I know we have code related to that, and Tony provides good updates, but that's one of those things with, I just learned from Tony, we had 950 ash trees removed due to emerald ash borer. So all cities, there's probably planning language that other cities have come up with already related to reforestation. But I get a lot of questions about that. It seems like every time there's maintenance on trees, people are concerned about when the next trees are going to be planted. So a forestry element to the parks piece. But I know parks is otherwise, to Harry's point, also keeping track of sort of the action items and goals. I like the idea of if things are accomplished, checking them off and establishing new to-dos. So. Otherwise, do we need further action on this? If Tim's willing to take some leadership in planning and maybe bring those recommendations to us? Yes.
I believe Caroline had a question. I think she
yes,
had
Caroline.
Yeah, just a comment and a question. I think as, the new city administrator, I would really appreciate the update, because I think that could create a strategic plan for myself. And with the new census data coming out, I don't know if that could be incorporated, but that would be interesting to see how the demographics of the community have changed. And then I just wonder, is there also an opportunity? Is there anything in the comprehensive plan that's no longer a priority that was? It hasn't been accomplished, but it's no longer a priority. That might be interesting to look at as well.
Agreed. Thanks for that. Thanks, Harry, for teeing that up for us. Now we have a small cities development program. I think we still have Karen. Yes, thank you. Hi, Karen. Thanks for hanging with us. It's a long night.
You're on mute, Em.
We had in our March meeting a motion to table the small cities development program packet because we had some questions we wanted the city attorney to have time to review related to the federal policies that come with this program. You probably all saw the correspondence with Mike. There was not concern related to some of the questions. I thank you, Mike, for clarifying some of that for us. So we have the small cities development program packet again for us. And page 1 lays out all the items that need action from the city. As you recall, there's a lot of them. And so we would have several motions and resolutions within the document. As I understand it, let's see. We have the opportunity to combine these motions and resolutions into one. Is that correct? Mike might be driving now. He probably can't. That's my recollection from the last meeting, is that we can make a motion to adopt the policies, the contract policies incorporated in the packet affiliated with the grant contract number, CDAP 19-00500, I'm sorry, 5120. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yep. Sorry, Mary, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay.
So you could do that. You just want to list the resolution numbers. Did we include resolution numbers in each resolution?
Let me see.
So do we have like 2021 dash? I sent them as a blank, they're blank forms, but usually you'd want to, wherever the city is at in the resolutions, if your last resolution was 2021-07, you'd want to sequentially number those. And I think it's probably not terribly important, but I think in case with these grant funds, they request things sometimes, and they might request the transactional approval. And so I think you'd want in the minutes that if you do it that way, either to specifically list them out, but better practice would be to list the numbers with that. So I think in this case, that's fine. The problem always with doing that is if the votes are different.
Sure.
So I think what you should do, if you're going to do it that way, is have a discussion with the council.
Mm-hmm. And if there's whether we have some differences. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very good. So to Mike's point, I'm not seeing the resolution numbers added here, but staff can correct me.
They're there.
They're there. Okay.
Like if you go to 305, it's resolution 7-2021. I don't know how many resolutions there are. 4 of them. So I know there's 5-2021, 6-2021, 7-2021, and I would assume 8-2121. So if there's only 4.
Okay, thanks. No, this was not coming up for me. Keep having to reopen this attachment.
I see 16 of them.
Well, that's why I asked.
That's what I see too.
Resolutions, some of them are kind of, I wouldn't call them resolutions, but
1, 2, 3, 4. They're motions only. Okay.
Mayor, there's four resolutions and 9 motions.
Right. There. Okay, here we go. But wait. Let's see. Okay, thanks. I thought I was pulling up another. Can staff share the document and click through the resolutions? My document is just stalling out here. There we go. Okay, I can see, yes, 5001. So this one is entering into the project and having Centra, giving Centra the authority to perform all the administrative activities. So that's one. I'm just going to clarify what they are, and then we can have discussion about whether there might be need to separate them. 06-2021 is that we would adopt a civil rights policy prohibiting the use of excessive force by law enforcement agencies within its jurisdiction against any individuals engaged in violent civil rights demonstrations, basically police doing what they're already obligated to do, and enforcing applicable state and local laws against physically barring entrance to exit from a facility or location, which is the subject of such a nonviolent civil rights demonstration. 07-2021 is a resolution of adoption of residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan. And Resolution 08-2021 is entering into the grant agreement with the state of Minnesota, acting through the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and entering into an administrative contract with Centra for the administration of the deed grant, and allowing, oh, thank you. Now mine is gone. I think it was allowing them to essentially act as a fiscal agent. Is that correct? So when I'm in that document, the easiest way for me to handle it, just for staff, is to use the find function and look for resolution, and it just clicks right through. But those are the 4 resolutions. Do we have any discussion about those needing to be separated?
I think in the first meeting, I probably had the most questions. The memorandum by the attorney has really answered them all. In particular, I think one thing I brought up was allocation of the funds, which was actually spelled out in the document. And, you know, sometimes you miss things when you go through. So, you know, there's a set amount of funds that are allocated for administration, which, you know, I wasn't cognizant of the first time around. So there are safeguards in place. And the administrative funds allocated seem completely reasonable for the amount of money that has to be administered. One resolution that I do not want to vote affirmative on is 06-2021. As I said last time, I think it's unnecessary. You know, this state law, it's federal law. There's no reason we have to vote, as symbolic as it is. I'm not usually someone to stand in the way of progress because of a symbolic motion, but here I am. And I just don't want to vote for this. If you want to separate this out, I'm happy to vote for the rest of them.
Was that 6, Brian?
Yes, 06-2021.
Any further discussion?
If that's separated out, is this mute then of even doing this?
As I understand Mike's guidance, we want to list the resolution numbers for the record. And so we would have a motion related to 5, 7, and 8. Separate 6 for a separate motion.
That's right.
I got you. Okay, I got you.
So I'll make the motion to approve 5, 7, and 8.
We have a motion from Tim. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Dean. We have a second. Any further discussion? We'll take a roll vote.
Fellow,
Yes.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Woodley,
Yes.
Falcom. Falcom,
Yes.
Walrick,
Yes.
Duran.
Yes. All right, so then we could entertain a motion to also resolve the Wabasha City Council hereby adopts the civil rights policy and enforce applicable state and local laws. And that's resolution 06-2021. Do we have that resolution?
Moved by Moyer.
We have a motion from Dean. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Craig. Any further discussion on that item? I know it seems like, you know, I maybe I'm jaded. I work with so much federal policy that requires you to follow state and federal law. I guess I'm accustomed to it. I talked to Chief Stark about this, and, you know, it's one of those things that doesn't feel good to have the police called out as if they don't already follow state and federal law. So I understand what Brian's saying. I don't know if that jeopardizes our funding status. Maybe Buffy or Karen cares to comment on that if we don't satisfy a resolution in this regard.
I will comment on that. That is a federal requirement. Otherwise, we would not have it in place. So we do have to have opportunities for the public to voice their opinions on the grant program. We do that through public hearings. We did one when we initially applied for the for the grant application, excuse me. And then we'll do a second public hearing midway through the grant period, which is typically 30 months to 36 months, depending on effective date. So there are opportunities, but yes, it is a condition of the grant. Otherwise, we would not have that in there.
Right. And I'm just presuming there are entities that in some cases, you know, this has been an issue. The federal policy usually evolves because of some precedent that's necessitated it. So we have a resolution in a second. Do we have any further discussion or questions about that? Adopting that resolution 06/2021. All right, hearing none, we'll have a roll vote.
Walrick,
Yes.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Woodley,
No.
Sella,
No.
Falcom,
Yes.
Duran.
Yes. All right. And now I see we have all these motions that require signatures, of which there are 9. The grant contract, a drug-free workplace policy, fair housing plan, program income, the Section 3 plan, rehabilitation standards, policies and procedures for owner-occupied rehabs, a walkaway policy, and post-grant administrative contract. And Karen outlined those in our prior meeting, sort of the necessity of those or the rationale. Do we have any desire to pull any of those, or can we adopt, would anyone entertain a motion on those items?
Moyer makes motion.
Oh, Walrick seconds, all of them.
Great. We have a motion and a second. We have a motion from Dean and a second from Tim. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none, we can have a roll vote.
Woodley,
Yes.
Sella,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Walrick,
Yes.
Falcom,
Yes.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Duran.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Buffy, for being with us. We appreciate that your time and attention to these questions. Mike, we appreciate the clarification on the questions council had last time. You can probably let Mike go. He looks like he's in a vehicle and probably needs to get somewhere. So we appreciate you, Mike. Thanks for everything.
I had mineral water for dinner. So.
Yeah. That's not sufficient. All right. Thank you. Now we have our Wabasha Riverfront Revitalization update from our colleagues at the NEC. Meg or Randy, I'll let you take the floor.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. The mayor asked if we would provide periodic updates, and we're here to do that tonight. We're happy to report we have completed the schematic design process, so we will be sharing those slides with you. At the end, we'll talk about the critical path and what we need from the city at this point. So Meg's going to handle the slides, and I'll take you through the schematic plans along with the schedule for construction and the cost summary with the final estimates. Final estimates, mind you, there's still work to be done, but the schematic design is a step that's necessary for the state of Minnesota, and we are virtually ready to submit. So Meg, let's take a look at the building. This is the high-level view of the campus. You will see the city dock has now been reduced in size to a more manageable size. It's in the budget at 200-foot dock, if I recall. Oh, we jumped ahead there. And so the city's portion there in that kind of slate gray includes the dock and the pedestrian navigation upgrades along the riverfront. The light green area is, of course, the amphitheater, and that is the responsibility of the Eagle Center. It's formed to emulate the existing profile of the land, so we'll have to disturb as little soil as possible to create this. And it has simplified a little bit from the original one, fewer sidewalks and so forth, but it really fits into that space nicely. The upper area there with the hash markings will be flat ground with some sort of pavers or concrete work, and that area will be available for various purposes not least being potentially, food carts and things of that sort. The pink area on the riverfront is obviously the existing riverfront building. We'll have more detail on that in a later slide here. The blue area is Big Joe Alley. And you can see we squeezed a lot into Big Joe Alley. Turned out the property lines for the buildings and at the end of the buildings along that back. So that freed up some space that allowed us to get parking for 9 or 10 vehicles, plus handicap parking, and then also a couple handicap spots in front of the building. So you can see there's a little turn in the road in Big Joe Alley designed to slow traffic. And the grades came out well. We're just really excited about how this has come together. The pink area on Main Street is building 2 and 3. And our original hope was to be able to activate building 1, 2, and 3. We ran a little bit short on budget, which we'll go through with you. But we think we've got a good plan to address all of the deliverables that were originally intended. And then with an expansion plan that's sort of ready-made. So I'll get to that a little bit more when we look at the inside schematics. But that's the 10,000-foot view of the whole campus. Oops. That's okay.
Sorry.
Now we're getting into more detail on the amphitheater. You can see the elevation markings there and how it will snuggle down in there. It'll be beautiful. It is aimed a little bit away from the residences on the north side, the upriver side, I should say. As you can see, to direct some of the sound back towards the Eagle Center. It also just fit in there naturally in that position. So it made it for a more economical approach. Don't, go to the bank with the trees and so forth. Those are kind of put in at this point just for aesthetics. We're going to have to figure out how we do that, but we're going to be very mindful that we don't want to cut off eyesight, towards the river and the bridge. I think as you sit in the amphitheater, it'll be beautiful. You'll be looking down on the entertainment area, education area, and then the bridge and the river will occur in the background. Okay, I think next slide. This is now floor 1 of the Riverfront building, the existing building. The pink areas are the areas of significant change. There will be additional changes made to exhibits, but we're here to talk about the pink area. Oops.
Sorry.
No problem.
It's very touchy.
It's touchy. So the round circles are that's the existing Muse area that you're all familiar with. However, it has been expanded a little bit. The limiting wall there, the glass wall, has been pulled back into the main building a little bit further, not a lot, 4 or 5 feet if I recall, but enough to give people a little bit more elbow room in that space as they observe the birds. The bird spaces are now up to, or will be up to, National Wildlife or Wildlife Service standards in terms of the diameter of space allowed. And also we will have some minimal barriers between the birds so that they aren't interacting quite as much as you now.
Sorry.
Oops. Okay, so that space doesn't change dramatically, but it will be quite different from an operational standpoint because we are going to redo the plumbing underneath so that it's much more efficient to clean and service. The areas of big change are in the lower left, that pink space. That is the back room, if you will, for Eagle Care. And it now houses 3 additional Eagle Mews. The birds will have access to natural light and presumably the ability to get some air in there as well, if we wish. Again, up to National Wildlife Service standards. Also a small mews in the very foreground that would be too small for an eagle, but could potentially accommodate a hawk or some other raptor. The back room is quite a bit bigger than it was because one of the walls, Meg, maybe you could point at the doors there, that has been pulled back from where it was, where Meg is now pointing to the new space, and that's opened up some good considerable area for eagle care. So we'll have a more professional back room. It's also been designed, though, with the notion that while it is a back room, it'll be presentable to the public in the event we wish to take the public through there. And so it'll open up some opportunities for us for backroom tours and things of that sort for donors and that kind of thing. Better care for the birds and a more practical space to allow selected visitors in from time to time. The back room occurs behind the Muse, and that will continue to be just strictly back room. The bird shower is back there and a number of other things. So that's the first floor. In terms of exhibits, we're going to continue to concentrate on the birds and the science, environmental science and so forth on the first floor. And I'm not suggesting that the exhibit strategy has been finalized, because it has not, but it'll probably go along the lines of, the bird and the science, which dates back in history, something like 1 million years in a reasonably identifiable form, the bald eagle. And so we'll have a lot of history here, and we want to talk about what makes this place special in terms of attracting birds, which of course is the open water, and the whole geological history of the area. We have a little of that now, but we feel there's a lot more to be discussed there, and we would see that occurring on the first floor. So this is where you see the birds, and this is where you get educated about the science of the birds. Okay, next slide. Now we're up on the second floor. As you arrive at the landing on the top of the stairs, you'll recall there is a Fish and Wildlife Service oriented exhibit there now. That space will probably be redone in this process to provide us an additional gallery space. But the big changes are the pink areas. The existing meeting room will now become gallery space, and that will house the Native American exhibit. So now we're progressing through history to a point in time that is thousands of years ago, probably tens of thousands of years ago, but sort of post Ice Age. So back in, perhaps 15,000 or so years. And this will be a collaborative effort with the Prairie Island Indian community. We had a good conversation with their representative today. And I think we've got a real positive and really fascinating opportunity as we evolve from the science of the birds to include now the cultural, historical, and spirit, in the case of the Native American, spiritual symbolism of the bird. This will be explained in this space. Also, we want to point out that when you're in that gallery, you will be able to look down through the windows on the amphitheater area, as you can now, if you recall. But we will continue the Native American exhibits outdoors. So that space will be a great opportunity to talk about the Mdewakanton tribe in particular and their history, literally on the soil on which the Eagle Center now stands. So it really works well in terms of flow. Continuing through, we're going to walk past the video alcove. That will be larger than our current one, and it's still small, modest in size, but very useful in terms of multimedia presentations. And then you enter the Foreground Gallery, and at the onset, we expect this to be the beginning of the Preston Cook collection. So now we've moved further through history. to post-colonial era, which is when most of Preston's artifacts begin. And we'll be able to talk about what the eagle means symbolically and culturally here in America. And so that will feature the Preston Cook collection, the beginning of it. And you'll see when we get to the Main Street piece that we think we've got an evolution planned here as we acquire more Native American artifacts and as we activate more of the space on Main Street, we will likely begin to fill both of these galleries with a more Native American oriented theme and then expand the Preston Cook collection on Main Street, which it fits sort of in spirit very nicely because those are, you know, turn of the century buildings themselves. So they date back to that era largely. So that's the game plan on floor 2. We're excited about that and really think we've got an efficient plan that's maximizing the use of our existing space by way of repurposing that footage. We're also expanding the outdoor mews or weathering yard, as we call it, for the birds. This is an important part of eagle care and also an area that the Native Americans are very sensitive to in terms of how we treat the birds respectfully and appropriately. And so we are working in conjunction with them to make sure their interests are served. And also, obviously, we're working with the Fish and Wildlife Service to make sure we're adhering to requirements. There will be glass door from the back room outside so we can keep track of what's happening with the birds that are out there. And important to point out that there will be some fencing in the foreground here because we will be at, you know, the level of the birds, and this is a space that we can't risk the birds being upset by dogs and so forth. However, because the way the land falls away towards the river, it's very conducive. So on the river side, the birds will still have visibility to the river and to the sky. So from the bird standpoint, they won't be bothered because the pedestrians walking below will not be able to see up in there. The birds will have visibility to the open space, which calms them down and makes for a much more palatable situation for all involved. This time of the year, our birds, for those who don't know, get very restless because it's the mating season. The females are in their egg laying mode. The males are territorial. They're all territorial, and they're easily agitated this time of the year. So we would like to think that this new space will be much more conducive to good care for the birds who are the stars of the show. Okay. This is Main Street, and here you can see the 2 buildings we'll be activating initially. Building 2, numbering from right to left, is our entrance from Main Street. So you'll now be able to enter the Eagle Center from Big Joe Alley as well as Main Street. So we'll have an informational desk. We have a little flex space on the left side there that will be for, you know, exchanging out exhibits and things of that nature. This whole space will be ringed with exhibits. So this is where the Preston Cook collection will be largely appearing at this point. And then there will be an opening between building 2 and building 3. And in building 3, we will be housing, for now, our new classroom / auditorium. It's only about the same size as our existing classroom in terms of capacity, but we do see it as a bridge to the day when we're able to complete phase 2, which would include the more substantial auditorium at the back of the building. For now, it'll work. It'll be rung with exhibits as well. And we think we'll have a really nice space, new bathrooms towards the back, which are, necessary for the public. Those little dotted lines in building 2, you can ignore. They're delimiting existing infrastructure that will be moved out of the way. That's where the furnace is now, and that'll be moved to the back corner. As you exit building 2 out the back, on Big Joe Alley, there will be a platform there. And then you will walk down a series of stairs to Big Joe Alley grade. And in that area, Meg, if you could point at A there, so that is not a hard construction. That's open space. I'm referring to it as our educational plaza for lack of better descriptions. That space would be able to house like a hard-walled exhibition grade tent if we wish to do that. And my suspicion is we will, because that would serve us well during our busiest months, especially a year like this. It's clear we could have been outside, pretty much all the way through March this year. And we would like to do more programming outdoors. And it's sort of a substitute for the more elegant auditorium that would then be planned for the second phase of construction. So that space will be, that footprint will be useful in the meantime, and there will be nothing there that has to be thrown away to continue with phase 2 when that time comes. That applies, by the way, to everything we're doing. These backs of these buildings will be firmed up and restored, and none of that will interfere or have to be torn back out with the advent of phase 2. Building
Randy,
1 would be
can I also
I'm sorry,
say-
Meg, yes.
Can I also point out that this is a ramp? So this will be, there are 2 ways, and in addition to 2 entrances to this space and the stairs here from the Riverfront building, this will also be a ramp to ensure access as well.
Right.
That's being added. That's much better than the ramp system we have at this point.
Yes, the whole back of the building will look very professional now. And in fact, we're going to have to quit referring to it as the back of the building, because it should be a handsome space back there. The fact that the buildings all are different sizes, we think is terrific, because instead of one big sort of obtrusive wall, we'll have the more interesting shapes of the individual buildings themselves. Building 1, you can see we aren't currently moving forward on, although we haven't lost hope on that in terms of how far we could proceed. We just don't want to overpromise at this point. Based on the budget that we're at right now, we just don't have the funds to move forward on building 1. Meanwhile, it can house administration, which will save us some money rather than having to look off-site for that. But it's not a huge undertaking, and with a little additional fundraising, it's possible we could make a little more headway on building 1. Building 4 on the far side, the long game plan is that that will be admin eventually, and that would most likely be the last building that we would proceed on. That will likely come with phase 2. Okay. So in terms of timing, I guess I should add that Main Street buildings will have some cosmetic, we don't have a slide on it, but the fronts of these buildings, we're figuring out ways to make them safe and appealing without undergoing major restoration. And so, for example, they will be coordinated in terms of coloration, they will be canopied and so forth, all subject to the Historical Society's input. But we think we can really make for an appealing storefront look to these buildings to set a nice tone for downtown and also stabilize them. So we don't have to worry about, the facades weakening and falling. Okay, I'm sorry, Meg, now we can go to the schedule. Okay, so you can skip the whole front of this stuff because we got, just read down to April 6th. That's where we are today, and we have completed the SD package, which is ready now to submit to the state. However, asterisk, we do need to get the development agreement signed, and we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. We would anticipate bids being able to be produced about June of this summer. And the entire package then would be completed by September of 2021, with construction beginning shortly thereafter. We would plan for the start of construction on Main Street and in the Riverfront building to begin October of 2021, with substantial completion, as you can see there on the right side, by February of 2022. In other words, we're going to do our internal construction this winter and be ready to open the doors with a bang in spring of next year. The outdoor space, of course, is not going to be able to be built during the winter months. So unfortunately, that will have to push to a construction start of March of next year and substantial completion by September of next year. We'd like to have the amphitheater and the whole outdoor space put into service before the snow flies next fall. So our grand opening of the whole project will likely be spring of 2023, but the construction itself will occur over nearly a year's period. And when we get to the cost slide, I'll talk a little bit about some of the reasons for that. Okay, so we had a budget of 5.8 million, and hats off to our architects and so forth. We started a couple $100,000 high, several $100,000 high. We were able to make good adjustments that didn't detract from the aesthetics, and absolutely did not detract from the functionality and the deliverables, but frankly are somewhat, a little bit less elegant than the first draft. So that picked up some good value, and they actually came to us with a budget that was literally on budget to the dollar. However, there was a caveat, and that was that their preference would have been to build both elements simultaneously, meaning do the inside work and the outside work. The rationale on their part is, instead of having 5 or 6 months of project management expense, instead of having 12 months of project management expense, we could have reduced it to 5 or 6 months if we were able to build simultaneously. But because you can't do outside work in winter, we'd have been stuck with building in the summer. And there were two things that were wrong about that. One is it would have required waiting until next summer to, begin the project. And two, it would have required us to be closed down, or at least largely closed down for large parts of the summer season. And especially in the context of having just come through such a disruptive period, we just don't want to interrupt the continuity of the organization from the visitor's perspective. So we swallowed hard and allowed them to break the budget by 179,000. That's our problem. The Eagle Center is going to come up with a way to raise that additional money in order to do phase 1. So we are here to tell you that the total project has now grown to about 6 million, just shy of 6 million. But the city's portion is unchanged. Your costs are there in front of you, and they are scoped out at exactly what the budget was of $1.5 million. So we're excited about it aesthetically, functionally. The timing is good, and I think we've got a terrific plan. So I went through that awfully quickly. I know it doesn't hold a candle to all the other things we were discussing tonight, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them best I can.
Randy, this is Dean Moyer.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I sure can.
Can you go back to number 3?
Yes.
And my concern there is, you had said you eliminated some sidewalks. As you know, I'm very big on sidewalks. And screen 3 showed that the sidewalk from Big Joe Alley down to the bike path was eliminated. Can you explain why?
Meg, can you pull that up? Screen 3, Dean, thanks.
It shows outside pavilion?
Outside pavilion right there?
Yes.
Okay.
Dean, I don't think it was eliminated and believe me, if there is not an accessible, appropriately accessible functionality, we would fix that. But I know they're attentive to that. Meg, we're not seeing the screen.
I'm not seeing
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on.
Randy, I can answer that.
Okay, Brian, thank you.
So Dean, in the original layout, we did have a sidewalk on the far west end of the site. It was,
Right,
that was a really intense.
Between the condo and the.
Yeah, adjacent to the condos, yep. And that was really intended back when the intent of the dock was to accommodate the Mississippi Queen or a large vessel like that, where we needed to have a circular route for a delivery vehicle to get down to the dock and then get out of the site. It also ended up serving as an ADA accessible route as well. But that was one of the pieces that was eliminated to try to get the dock piece of the project back on budget. And so, yeah, the ADA path now down to the amphitheater is along the river trail along the east side of the building.
And that's always been my fear, is that would be eliminated. I figured it would be. And quite honestly, if you can hear my voice, I'm not happy with it at all. But I will deal with it. But
well, and what I would say, Dean, is
pretty stern on that.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that dock is accessible also. But
yeah,
I feel that probably isn't also.
Well, I can answer that. I could answer that too, Dean. The intent is to make the dock ADA accessible, and as Randy mentioned, we're this is the end of the schematic design phase. We'll be moving into the design development phase, and I can say we will look at that to see when we get into detailed design and the next phase of costing, to see whether we can get an accessible path from Big Joe Alley down to the amphitheater. We'll continue to look at that and see if we can.
I'm just going to make this one comment, is I see it happen all the time where families are walking with loved ones that are in scooters and wheelchairs and walkers, and they cut across that area there. And of course, those individuals have to go 2 blocks to catch up to them. That's a problem. It should be addressed, and it was supposed to be addressed. And I'm not happy that it's not, that it was cut out.
Well, Dean, thank you for that comment, and trust us, we will absolutely sit down and sort that out. Our intent was absolutely not to be less accessible. As Brian said, the main purpose of that entrance was actually for heavy trucks, and it might just be, I hate to admit it, but maybe we just didn't think that through well enough. So we'll surely take a look at that, and I'm going to commit to you, this will be accessible to the level that will make you comfortable. I have no problem committing to that. We'll figure it out.
Yep.
Very good.
Any other comments?
Yeah, this is Craig Falcom. Is there any way we can get copies of these drawings?
Yes.
Yes. We literally, Craig, we literally just got these yesterday from the architects and the various firms. So we will pull together good JPEGs of them and get them to you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, these drawings are in the public domain at this point, so there is no problem with us sharing them. We just, as Meg said, we just didn't have time to get it into the packet in advance of this meeting.
Randy, I got a question. Tony from Public Works.
Yes.
Brian did fill us in on a few things today. We had a staff meeting and we were kind of shocked when we seen the changes with the dock size and the ramp leading down to it. We lost the service drive to get down there. If we're going to have to take the loader down, I use that green space now to get down there because we got quite a small blacktop path and then the nice pavers on by the fountain. So I'm just kind of wondering if we got to get that ramp out of there every year, or is that going to be something that's going to stay? How much maintenance does that change? And then also one other thing is I try to think about the future, is limiting that dock going to limit on who can come to town and what we might attract in the future, whether it's 5 or 10 years out. And I know costs are a big factor on why this was changed. So
no, really good points. I think I can address them reasonably well. So the long ramp is especially long because of the grade, obviously. And I think that is required for the ADA accessible. One of the things we talked about, and this may be wishful thinking, but would it be possible for that ramp to swing so that, it was easily stored on the shoreline in the winter months? That's all stuff that's going to have to be sorted out. The truth is the dock is an area that we need more city involvement in. The city is responsible for the dock. It's in the budget. We know we can accommodate what we're showing here, but the decision about eliminating the full-fledged dock had two reasons. One was indeed cost, but I think the more significant driver is simply the feedback that we got from the steamboat operators, the paddle wheelers. The dock is located too close to the bridge for them to do a swing around turn. And they advised us that they could not use a dock that's positioned that close to the bridge regardless. So what they prefer is basically a bulkhead that is positioned on the river, which emulates more what they do often, which is pull right up on the mud flat and put down the gangplank. So what we're hoping is that the long range plan would be to add such a bulkhead down below the fountain somewhere, further away, a little bit more downstream so they can get the run at it. And then they just tow in there. They have to swing around and face upstream. And then they just tow in there. So, in talking to the steamboat companies, we realized it's more complicated than we anticipated, but also may not be practically useful for them. And we don't want to waste, the money if it's not going to be used by them. So those were the drivers on this decision. There's a lot to be determined about this dock. Okay, it's by far the least defined of all the elements in this project. So we want to roll up the sleeves with the city. And in fact, what we'd like to suggest, and we're not asking you to do this formally in any sense at the moment, but we want to get an official sort of city liaison that becomes a project management participant to be sure the city's interests are well served and to kind of spearhead that dialogue among city personnel to be sure we get you what you want there.
Thanks, Randy.
You bet. Any other questions or comments? Very useful feedback, you guys, so don't hold back. This is the time to say it. If not, I think that completes the program. The one thing we want to emphasize, though, is the development agreement. That is in draft form now. It's in front of our attorneys, and the city attorney have been working on it. We feel we have it finalized, and we need action on the part of the city, assuming the city agrees with that. So we would like to encourage you to get the conversation going with the city attorney and ask that you would try to make that an official action item for your May 4th meeting, because we are now at a crunch point where we cannot submit our final documents to the state to try to trigger the funding until we have that development agreement finalized. To our knowledge, there are no disagreements. It sounds like the structure is adequate for everybody's needs. And so it's just a matter of getting it set up as an action item. Because if you could execute that on May 4th, that'll give us the green light to stick with this schedule that we've laid out. It's an ambitious schedule. We will put it in front of our board in our April meeting, which comes up in a couple of weeks here. I'm confident we'll have approval from them. I'm not sure if the Port Authority has to have an official voice in it, or if the city council is the primary thing. But in any case, we would hope that we could get a resolution from you on executing that document at the May meeting.
Randy, if I may, it'd be nice for the Port Authority to take a look at it, but it would be an action item for the city council.
The city council, I figured that. Okay. Yeah, so I think, Meg, you planned on sending them the draft tomorrow. Yep. And so you guys have that in your hands, and then please get that dialogue going with your city attorney and make sure if there are any changes that need to be made in the development agreement, we can get those done and in front of you soon enough to still adhere to that May date. Anything else?
Yeah. Very good. It's good to see these details coming along. I really appreciate Tony and Dean, your comments, thinking about, who that liaison may be. And, I would have defaulted initially to our administrator, but there really is a lot of practical implications that would be really in Tony's wheelhouse that others might not think about. So it may be an and situation, not an or. So those are, the element of the service road, was discussed at length before, but we haven't really revisited it, to your point earlier.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Thank you for sticking with us. This might be a record meeting, but we have lots of business, so we really appreciate you being part of it.
You bet.
Thank you.
Do it. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
All right, we have again, back to our agenda item 10.6. We have transfer building condition update from Tony. Tony, help us get up to speed. We had a thorough report from you regarding some roof issues with the building.
I'm gonna do my best to keep this one under an hour. But I got, we got to decide on what we want to do or what you want to do with the building long term. And if we're going to do some repairs onto it, where's the money going to come from? And we kind of knew that the building was in rough shape. Never really known if we were going to keep it or tear it down, make parking. But the time has come to make some short-term and long-term decisions on it, and looking for options, opinions, and ideas.
John, I don't have notes from the last Port Authority discussion, but I know this came up with regards to the utilization of that building, either as a development opportunity or the current use, and sort of weighing the merits of both. Can you recall was there a consensus on that out of that group?
Well, the only real consensus is that we agreed that we couldn't really think about what to do without maybe some cost factors in in repairs. I think the Port Authority recognizes it as a development property right now. It's probably pretty far-fetched. So the idea of, and we didn't know what the cost would be to stabilize the building and to continue to utilize it as a space for the chamber or other uses, if that made sense or not. So now that we have these numbers, I haven't bounced them off the Port Authority members at this point, but we don't have a strategy for that building yet. And we kind of had it on hold, allowing the chamber to continue to use it. Really, it was going to be up and through 2020, I believe, or 19, but then with COVID hitting, it kind of got put on the back burner. So we didn't come up with a specific, here's our plan with that building. The building belongs to the city. It doesn't belong to the Port Authority. So we would recommend development ideas, but it would be a final decision for the city council.
This is Dean. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah, I was on the council when we spent too much money to purchase those buildings. The idea back then was to turn them into parking. And I think we should no longer spend a dime on those things and tear it down, put parking in, and then if somebody wants to come in 5 years or whatever to develop it, at least we got temporary parking. I'm totally against putting any more money into that building.
Any other thoughts? This has obviously been a long-standing consideration.
I agree with Dean. I think we should tear that thing down.
I agree with Dean and Jeff as well about putting any more money into it, period.
I think, Dean, you asked me how many, we've been brainstorming ideas. I mean, we're looking at, it's almost identical to the lot that's across from the library. So you're looking at a 28 to 29 additional parking spaces if it was turned over into parking.
And I like that because that's huge for our downtown parking, which we need.
You'd have to, one other thing though, you'd have to decide on if you're going to blacktop and stripe it.
Let's gravel it for now and stripe it later. Or blacktop it later.
I wouldn't want us to go forward with any of those discussions without the cost of demolition considered as well. Unless somebody has a magic wand.
I think it's about ready to fall over. I don't think there's going to be much cost. I would look into finding somebody that's into metal recycling. See if they can take it down for us. They get all the money.
I could get some information together. You know, for we got to go another month. But I mean, it, you know, we're going to have to make a good decision tonight on it, because the longer we wait, the more leaks there is, and there's items stored in there. That's my only problem right now. And you get up there and walk around and it's spongy. I mean, you're just waiting to go through.
Who's storing stuff in there right now?
I don't exactly know who owns the material, but I know it has to do with Grandpa's boutique or barn.
We did get some clarification on that. We had some clarification on that. Did that come to you, Tyler? I can't remember. We got clarification from the chamber.
Yeah, Steve Enning was one of the people that paid rent for that building. And Carolyn Cleese, I believe, also has some material in there as well.
And they had some storage fees associated with that.
Yeah, $600 per year each.
So, you know, there's some level of, I guess obligation is a strong word. The boutiques are on. Our chamber has those events planned. Those vendors are counting on that. So we, to Tony's point, it won't be torn down immediately. Even if that's the ultimate decision.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to pay attention to whatever commitments we make for Grandpa's barn. So I don't know that that's going all the way through the summer of 21 or what, but there's something there. Another thing is we've got we just remodeled the old garage that Glander had there. So it's now the food shelf, food share. So we're going to have an impact on that, but that may end up going somewhere else eventually. I wonder, Glander's building, food share isn't using all of it, is it? And is Glander's building worth saving the part that food share isn't using?
Well, at least they're two separate buildings, you know, they don't have a common wall.
Right.
Divided. But I think it's, from what I've been told, it's just the front third or quarter of the building that's been fixed. It's the same roof, the same walls, just the inside is fixed up.
Well, I wonder if we should take some consideration as to whether we want to save the rest of Glander's building, or we want to demolish that when we take down Grandpa's barn.
I'm under the understanding that we're talking about the old transfer building, not the Glander building. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I'm expanding it. I'm going to say, if you're going to demolish the Grandpa's barn, there's another building there. It's different construction. It's block construction, I think. But it's not in that great a shape either. So maybe the city does own that one too. So you may want to think about, if you're going to be building a parking lot, you may want to be able to use that back end of that for some additional parking or some maneuvering.
I suggest we leave the Glander building as it is for now, but certainly let's look at trying to get rid of the transfer building.
I'd agree with that. There's been significant community investment in that relocation of that food share, and that I think that would be viewed as not being a good partner in terms of that community investment. That is a need our community faces. They've had a very happy home in our healthcare center for a long time, but that just isn't feasible anymore. Lots of cities helped to sustain their food shelves in some way, shape, or form, and significantly more than we do. So that would seem very reactive. With regards to parking, you know, I park in that lot many days of the week, and it's often during regular business hours when the core demand is for parking in our traditional downtown core. It's almost never full. So I'd hate to say like we need that whole parcel to be parking. I don't think there's evidence of that. There are times when there's a pressure on parking when it certainly would be helpful, but it's rare. It's rare on a regular daily basis that would be full. That doubling that would now be justified.
I just want to clarify, I'm not talking about taking down the entire Glander building. I was talking about the part that's closer to the alley, because that's not being used at all, as I understand it, by the food shelf.
It's actually full of, that's where they do a lot of the painting for the cutouts that are around town, the Christmas holiday decorations, Septoberfest. It's kind of an open space for a couple people to do, you know, the paint work down there and cutting and all that stuff. But
okay, well, that's what I wanted to hear. Is anybody using it, or is it just vacant
Right.
space?
and
It's off-season storage for our public bikes and for the chassis, right? Is there any other city stuff in there?
no, I don't. Yeah, I think the group bikes or whatever you want to call them, I think those are in there. We do the Republic bikes up at our shop. Does anybody know if we have a contract with who's using the transfer building now that we have to worry about any timelines?
We might have something with the Chamber of Commerce. We should check into that.
And then just to be clear, what for a timeline, if I go out and request bids to demolish the building and remove the material and fill with crushed rock, we probably got services in there we need to cap. There is a sewer in there, a sewer service. What are we looking at for timeline? When do you, other than checking into see if there's a contract with the chamber, which I don't think there is, but you want to do it this summer? I mean, the sooner the better if that decision is made, because obviously it's leaking and unless they care about the items that they have in there. I mean,
Well, I could, I'm gonna, Wabasha Main Street's meeting tomorrow. We could, and as chamber comes to that, I could stop by there and make sure they're gonna come and see if they're ready to discuss that, if they have any information as to if they have a lease or what.
Yeah, as I had mentioned, I think it went through 2019, the agreement that the port kind of had with them about using it. I don't think we had really anything in place for 2020. Although, I mean, if they've got commitments for their boutiques, and it's something we might need to consider honoring, at least until they're through those, then that's when we get rid of it.
and that would lead us to the end of Septoberfest. What you're thinking, right?
That's kind of my impression. I hate to say it, but
That's my impression too.
My question is, insurance-wise, what liability does that put on the city if it's in that bad a condition and something happens?
I myself do not have an answer for that one. We can find out.
My point is, I don't, it doesn't matter to me if we wait till October or September, and it's September, but if it's liability on our part, then I would be opposed to keeping it that long. So we just have to figure out what the liability is, I guess.
Maybe we should call up the guy on TV with the Flex Seal and paint the whole ceiling there.
I thought about that, Craig. I thought about putting rubber membrane over the top, but I think the weight from that would probably collapse the entire building. Do
that we see how long the contracts that we currently have are through, and to me, again, I would agree with Dean. If the liability is too high, we would need to figure out how to get rid of that. I'm hoping that if we had to have an estimate by next meeting about the tearing down cost, and go from there. And I think in May we can make that call. I don't want to put $61,000 into something that's going to be. I mean, my guess is we'd have to put probably $250,000 into the building. So I don't think it's worthwhile to do that. So if we don't have any obligations, and that's fine, we'll tear it down sooner. But if we have to honor it until October, I think that's what we'll have to do.
Okay, so I'll come back with some information for next meeting. I can probably get 2 or 3 different prices on, because some people love these buildings. They're I-beam structure. They can take it down, move it, especially if they get it for free. So I don't think that's going to be a problem getting some information on that. And then we'll check with the insurance. And then if you check with the chamber, Craig, and if there's anything there as far as the contract, which I know nothing about.
Yeah, I don't know either, but we'll check and see if it expired in 2019 or if something is still going.
Okay. Mayor, do I need a motion for anything or just gather that information?
I think it's an information seeking ask.
Okay.
And maybe Tyler can help too, as he liaises on the chamber board and with the city's interests in mind. And I don't even remember there being a discussion of a contract. It was really more of them sharing their intent and the Port Authority agreeing that there was no intent to have any reason why they couldn't pursue their intent. And of course, 2020 was such an unusual year. I don't think even at this point we'd necessarily be prepared from a development standpoint to readdress it. It's only because of the maintenance issue that it's coming up.
Do you think it's best to vote to table it until May meeting?
Yeah, I think we need a lot more information.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Tony. All right, and we have.
Did you guys want to vote on it to table it or not? Or doesn't that matter?
I don't think we need to.
Okay.
This informational, and we'll get more information, have action in the next meeting.
All right.
Okay, so we now also need to discuss the Wabasha Legion and VFW request to search for a piece of military equipment for Veterans Park. So you saw this item summary. Tony, maybe you'd want to also give us a quick overview on this. We have the commander from the VFW came to the park board. They want to request some military equipment for Vets Park. There's a process that needs to go through. They need to go through. We're looking at the staff committee's recommendation. Park board's commission recommendation is to approve that. They did so and request that we approve as in kind. So we could. It's pretty straightforward. But is there anything else we should know about, Tony?
No, we checked it. We did check on the deed for that parcel of land because it's been brought up, you know, maybe we should sell it, maybe we should do this with that or that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's got to be for public use if the city's going to own it. So we think it's best to keep it as a display park. Obviously they can't perform any memorial functions down there because too busy roads, not enough room in the park, but we would like to add a piece of military equipment and then possible statues inside the sidewalk coming up down the road. We do have about 15,000 saved up in the Veterans Park Improvement Fund, and we'll continue to work on that. But other than that, I think they got a good concept. They got both of their clubs behind it, the park board's behind it. They just need the okay from all of us to go through their process, and it might take them years if they even find anything. So I think it's a good idea.
Hey, Tony, or at least Mayor, didn't we discuss potentially moving this if we actually go through the 60 goes through the ball field and stuff and potentially moving it down to a green area down there? Or was I completely lost my mind?
Well, I don't remember that, Tim. I can't say that it didn't come up.
If that was the case, I was going to say, you know, if they could find something great, but I'm not totally sure if we were talking about moving it, not to stick so much money right away, but transfer that stuff over to wherever we were. But if we're not moving it, then I'm fine supporting it.
The reason I don't think it came up, unless it happened in another conversation, I'm not saying it couldn't have occurred at a park board meeting or something, or in another, but in the process of the Greater Minnesota Futures, you'll notice that concept document, it outlines green space, but it doesn't designate any of that as park. It's just green buffer space. And again, that's just conceptual, but I think really the spirit of that was, since your comp plan says you're moving all your athletic facilities, let's focus on those facilities getting over to your, the designated parcel, and then just kind of work with green space, but no discussion of park as I remember it.
Okay. Well, with that, then I make a motion to approve the request.
Very good. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion from Tim, a second from John. Any further discussion?
Yes, this is Moyer. I have questions.
Thanks, Dean.
Tony?
Yes, sir.
Tony, was there any discussion on the upkeep of a helicopter? Like the 5-year upkeep and stuff? Because I know with the cannon in Cannon Park, that needs some work done on it. And probably 20 years ago, we did do some work on it. So about every 15 years or so, these things need to be refurbished or kept up. Was there any discussion on what something like that costs or what we're looking at?
The veterans organizations said that they would look to keep money for that and volunteers.
Very good.
Yep, we briefly talked about it because it's got to be, say if it's a helicopter, it can't be on the ground, it's got to be up in a pedestal.
Right. Yep.
And so in the cannon, that's a whole different.
I know.
That can't be moved. You can't hardly touch it. And then if you're going to restore it, it's going to cost a lot of money.
Yep. And
that's a whole nother situation there.
Yeah, we threw 30 grand into that probably 20 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. So
the city did?
Yeah. Yep. Under Mayor Meeks.
10 o'clock.
Okay.
All right, we have
one and only question on that.
Yep. We have a motion, a second. Do we have any other questions or discussion? We'll have a roll vote.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Friedmeier,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Falcom,
Yes.
Solo,
Yes.
Woodley,
Yes.
Durant.
Yes. All right. And I think this is our last item of general business, which was added, as Tyler mentioned, the Jetter vac truck resolution. We had a resolution for the purchase, execution of a lease purchase agreement for a new Jetter vac truck that was approved at our March City Council meeting. So now we'd have a motion to approve a resolution for the execution of lease purchase agreement. Tyler, any detail you'd want to share with us? I know there was correspondence with Mike Ubani related to the purchase and the agreement. Anything further? I know there was a typo that would be corrected at the time of our approval.
Yeah, the typo wasn't in the resolution, but one of the papers listed a different city, so we had that changed to say Wabasha. Basically, the total of the equipment is 167,500, 2.75% interest rate, 10 years monthly payments. So basically everything we discussed last month. And the Utilities Commission also approved it back in February. I'm just going through council again due to some tax benefits that our bank pointed out if we went through council.
And it sounded like Mike was able to verify that we should expect that.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion on that, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you, Dean. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Do we have any further discussion? All right, we'll have a roll vote.
Woodley? Woodley?
Yes.
Sella?
Yes.
Falcon?
Yes.
Friedmeier?
Yes.
Moyer?
Yes.
Walrith?
Yep.
Durand?
Yes. All right, and now we can entertain a resolution to accept donations for the month of April to the library. We have a $50 donation from Roland Hall and Mickey Nelson in memory of Reverend Robert Dunn, $684.51 also to the library for Wabasha County, from Wabasha County's SHIP Grand for Memory Minder kits, which are part of the library's activities starting in April. And to Public Works, a park bench for Beach Park in memory of Paul Harberts, and $100 to the holiday decoration for the holiday decoration fund from Donald Carr. Do we have a motion to approve the donations?
Waller will move.
Sala second.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion? All those, or we'll have a roll vote.
Friedmeier?
Yes.
Falcon?
Yes.
Moyer?
Yes.
Woodley?
Yes.
Sella?
Yes.
Walrith?
Yes.
Durand?
Yes. All right, and any further announcements? I meant to mention this at the top of the meeting. We should expect at some point a special meeting, probably jointly the Port Authority and the council, potentially as early as April, end of April here, for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to give us an update on the process they've been making on the draft dredge material management plan, and eventually, a formal public process for public comment. But they're committed to making that sort of presentation to get everybody back up to speed. It's been a long process, and their federal review takes time, and so we need to regroup on all those details. So just a fair warning that we may need to call for that special meeting for that agenda item only. Do we have any other announcements? We also have received our financials to council.
Got a quick reminder on the brush dump just for the public. Two people out there. Brush dump is going to get moved next Tuesday. We're going to open it up out there. We're working on signage, got a camera, and then we're going to haul the remaining stuff out there. And Darren got us the okay to burn from the fire department. So we're working on it. So
Tony, I got a question on that. I already know the answer, but I want to just make sure. That camera has infrared, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So you can't dump your brush in the middle of the night, Dean, or you can't help other people do that. All right, do we have any other announcements? Otherwise, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you, Tim.
Second.
Everybody's so tired, there's no second. Thank you, Brian. And we'll take a roll vote.
Walrith?
Yep.
Moyer?
No.
Friedmeier?
Yes.
Falcon?
Yes.
Sala?
No.
Woodley?
Yes.
Durand?
Yes, thank you. Sorry for the long meeting. It's just sometimes these items pile up, and I think we've got to be conscious that May could look similar. So we'll try to work on that and
Have a good night, everyone.
sure we have good balance. Thanks, everybody. Good night.